Study Commission for April 21st, 2025 to order. Can we have roll call, please? If we could have our Pledge of Allegiance and prayer, please. Yeah, for first item is public comment on any item on the agenda. Okay, and then if you go ahead and is there any public comment before we, okay, so go ahead, Jason, thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, my name is Jason Parrish. I work with the IT department for Butte-Silver. We are doing a technology refresh of this room, the streaming software and hardware, that will be taking place during the week of the 28th of April, which means that we will be taking this room offline for a few days. We've made arrangements for this commission to meet, if it so pleases you, at the Emergency Operations Center down on Wynn Avenue. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them as we proceed. But this is an item that we've had scheduled for several months now, and so we're just trying to slip in and get it done as quickly as we can. And our contractors will be here through that week to get it solidified.
Thank you, Mr. Parrish. Is there YouTube broadcast availability at the Emergency Center?
There will be when I get down there. I will assure you of that.
Any other questions from the commission? Ms. Shaw?
No question.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, I am going to make a couple of rearrangements in our agenda. We have our presentation with MSU Extension Service up first. However, something has delayed our presenter. So we will move that. And what I'd like to jump ahead to is if we can, just to give him a little bit of time, if we can jump to the correspondence or study commission update. If he doesn't arrive, then we'll jump into our presentations. So Ms. Cohn.
There were no communications this week. And I really don't think I have any updates that I haven't emailed, unless I've forgotten some that I sent you.
Just the one about the technology, which we just addressed.
Just the yeah.
Okay, let's go ahead and Lisa Carey, are you available? Oh, excuse me, Mr. Dennehy.
Madam Chair, shall we approve the minutes of April 14th?
Well, yes, we should approve the minutes of April 14th. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Ms. Shaw.
thank you. I would move to approve the minutes of the meeting that was held on the 14th of April, 2025.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Motion to approve. Moving on now. Thank you, Mr. Dennehy. I appreciate you keeping me on track. Ms. Lisa Carey, if you're ready with your conversation with departments. So as we've been starting these conversations, we like to inform everyone that this is a conversation. It's not meant to be a grilling. It's rather, how do we improve our services in Butte-Silver Bow for our constituency? And then we do have questions that will follow up as we go through the presentation. We sent you the original questions, but we'll roll through those kind of round robin. I'll start with you this time, Ms. Shaw, if we could.
Me, right?
Cindy, you want,
Oh,
Jen?
nice to
Cindy?
see you again, Lisa. Yes?
you want this?
Okay.
Or anything?
No, I got one. It's somewhere in my pile. Thanks. Nice to see you again, Lisa. We spent a lot of time together on LEPC, and I'm looking forward to hearing your updates. So the first question is, what are the specific responsibilities and duties of the Butte-Silver Bow Disaster and Emergency Services Director?
Thank you, Ms. Shaw. As the Director of Disaster and Emergency Services, I am responsible for developing and implementing a comprehensive emergency management program that aligns with the National Incident Management System. The program integrates the core principles of emergency management, mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery through multi-agency coordination to protect the lives, property, critical infrastructure, and the environment. Key responsibilities are as follows. Emergency planning and coordination, develop, implement, and regularly update the county's emergency operations plan and annexes, coordinate with local departments and external partners to ensure integrated response efforts and continuity of operations, also Emergency Operations Center management, which I'm looking forward to seeing you there next week, apparently, I just heard. Manage the Emergency Operations Center, ensuring the operational readiness, lead coordination of resources, information, and response activities during EOC activations for emergencies and large incidents. Maintain 24/7 availability to support EOC activations, coordinate emergency response, and provide leadership during critical incidents. Maintain and oversee the mobile command vehicle, ensuring it is equipped and ready for deployment to support field operations during major incidents, remote scenes, or events. To coordinate exercises and training, coordinate planning, and conduct emergency preparedness exercises, tabletop, functional, and full scale, in coordination with local, regional, and state partners. After each exercise, we conduct a hot wash or a debrief and produce an after-action report, so we identify the strengths, address the gaps, and guide improvement efforts. I participate in exercises when I'm invited. Arrange and encourage participation in training and educational programs for local officials, staff, volunteers, and partner agencies to build capacity, improve readiness, and ensure effective response during emergencies. Coordinate the local emergency planning committee, coordinate the ensuring multi-agency involvement in hazardous materials planning, public notification, and regulatory compliance under the Emergency Planning Community Right to Know Act, otherwise known as EPCRA. I manage the emergency notification system and IPAWS. We operate and manage the public alert systems, including, that's the Integrated Public Alert and Warning System. It's like an Amber Alert. Issue timely and accurate emergency alerts via text, phone, social media, other platforms to protect the public. And we maintain 24/7 operational readiness for emergency notifications and public alerts. We conduct threat and hazard identification and risk assessments, coordinate stakeholder preparedness reviews, and perform vulnerability assessments to identify risks and develop effective mitigation strategies. We establish and nurture strong working relationships with emergency response agencies, healthcare providers, schools, utility providers, businesses, non-governmental organizations, state and federal agencies, and promote collaboration and coordination before, during, and after emergencies. We have interagency collaboration and mutual aid support. We coordinate closely with local, regional, state, and federal partners, including law enforcement, fire, EMS, public health, and Montana DES. Develop and maintain memorandums of understanding, interagency agreements, mutual aid agreements, and support joint response efforts. Provide assistance when requested by other jurisdictions during expanding or regional incidents, ensuring cooperative resource sharing and response coordination across county lines. We provide emergency preparedness education through public campaign school programs, community events, encourage participation in training and educational programs to foster a culture of preparedness and resilience, engage the public with accessible information to help them prepare, respond, recover effectively. We do a lot of resource and grant management. We identify and we apply for and manage state and federal grants to fund preparedness, response, and mitigation projects. We have to track the expenditures, revenues, and ensure compliance with the funding requirements. There's regulatory compliance and reporting, ensure full compliance with federal, state, and local emergency management regulations, maintain detailed records, submit required reports related to emergency operations, training, and grant activities. Again, we have to have 24/7 availability to respond to emergencies, provide guidance, and activate resources, ensure immediate action can be taken during all phases of incidents, response, and recovery. I have a lot of participation with different committees and professional organizations, including Montana Emergency Management Association, the Butte-Silver Safety Committee, the State DES EMPG Work Group, the MEMA Mutual Aid Coordinator Program, the Butte-Silver DUI Task Force, Montana Fire Wardens Association, and others. The roles support collaboration, professional development, policy guidance, and statewide coordination of emergency management efforts. And I continue to professional development by actively participating in relevant training opportunities available. Currently working toward completing the FEMA Basic Academy, demonstrating a commitment to foundational emergency management knowledge, leadership skills, and best practices in the field. And if anyone has any questions about anything, feel free to ask.
Very good. Are there follow-up questions?
Sorry.
We're having an evening tonight, aren't we?
Yes, we are.
Mr. Soap, can you take number 2, please? Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Dolan.
It's okay. Thank you, Lisa, for being here tonight. I just wanted to ask you if you could explain to us the mutual aid piece of working with other surrounding counties that we have and how that works mutually between if there's something in another county, fire or whatever, what that looks like and what is our commitment, if you will, and reciprocal commitment of other counties. I just would like you to expound on that a bit.
Sure. One mutual memorandum of understanding, mutual aid agreement that we have is with the state DES department, where we have a reciprocal agreement that in the event that there's a disaster or emergency that doesn't allow them to utilize their facility, or if there's something in Butte-Silver Bow that wouldn't allow us to use ours, then we have an agreement in place to share facilities. They could come to Butte to operate, or we could go there to operate. As one example. Another example is just being a good neighbor in like some of these neighboring jurisdictions. And that's the one of the work groups I'm with now. They're trying to formalize that mutual aid agreement. So if a county or a neighboring jurisdiction, or I guess anyone's jurisdiction, like the flooding in Stillwater County or Yellowstone County, they called out like an EMAC there. It was more formalized at that point, where they go to help them. But there's smaller incidents like the ice jamming in Dillon, or most recently in December, Cascade County had an expanding incident that was a law enforcement related incident, and it just got pretty big pretty quick, and the paperwork had to be quite in order. And so they're looking for some people to go to the planning staff. You know, if you do your ICS, you have your different work groups, and they were short on planning, trying to retroactively create the reports as to what happened to the incident. And so I responded to that and went up to Cascade County with a couple other people, and honestly, it was a mutually beneficial experience. You know, the training that I received and the experience of being there was as worthwhile as me helping out. I started in planning, and then they were falling behind in finance, and so I said, maybe pull me over. So it was a good opportunity. And there is no charge. They paid for my hotel room, and other than that, I said, no, we won't be billing you.
Go ahead, Ms. Dolan.
Thank you. So just one follow-up too. Thank you for that information. I wanted you to expound on the mobile command center, or command vehicle, if you will. I know that Madison County has one as well. I'm asking because I'm concerned if there's a disaster and we lose, God forbid, people lose their cell service, everything, goes down from there. What is the command vehicle or command center mobile? What is that? What do we have the ability to do, and your staff do when a disaster strikes and you use it?
Thank you for the question. It is a Winnebago. It's like a 2005, 2006 Winnebago. So it's a large Winnebago, I guess we know that. It is stocked with computers and radios. It has a few base station radios installed in there. And even if those computers don't fire up, we still have the radios. We still have microwave. We have a bathroom. We have heat. Or if it was a hot situation, they have air conditioning. It's just a place to get out. We have a lot of some TVs where there is a camera on top. So we've used it before where there is like an incident, like one I can think of is the hostage situation with the bus at the Civic Center. They brought the mobile command vehicle there and had the camera going on so we could actually watch the incident from the EOC and, be, kind of leaning in to see if there's any other additional resources they'd require and keep people safe, that you can still see what's going on. And there's TVs inside the MCV, we call it. So even if the computers, if there is a glitch, and they do have Cradle Point in there, but in the event cell service go down, or let's say that it is a forest fire in an area that has no service, we had a deployable satellite, but now we've kind of upgraded into something smaller that's the Starlink. And so we can take that and we can get global positioning satellite. And so if people have their cell phones, they could talk through like a Wi-Fi telephone or some app that would allow you to do that.
Mr. Thielen?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lisa, thank you. Hey, just, excuse me, I'm getting over a cold here. You mentioned that was a 2005. How up to date is the equipment in this vehicle?
I think a lot of the computers went in there around 2019, and they've been updated. We updated in the IT department, makes a point of going updating it. And I think most of them are capable of upgrading to Windows 11. But again, as I said, as far as the computer side of things go, it's not really what, say, law enforcement is looking for. Perhaps the fire department, sometimes they get a little more technical with their drones and things. So I think that there's times that they'd like to maybe take it out and use their drone and be inside and be able to watch the drone activity on some of the TVs. But we did update some of the radios in there because they were the older Butte-Silver upgraded to the 800 megahertz radio system. And so some of those radios on there have been upgraded. So that's modernized.
Okay, moving on to number
So I had a question for Lisa also. Lisa, so when I was on the LEPC, I know it's an amazing department, and Dan, of course, is another one at the same time. It's so important, and it covers so many things. Sorry, it covers so many things. But back in the day, we had something called the CERTS. That was a civilian emergency response team, and I remember going through the training at Tech, and it was, I believe Tech maybe had been the basic group that promoted it and took it on, but then they stopped doing it. And I'd love to hear you say something about how it's coming back. Thank you.
I happen to have put in a request to bring in a CERT training this year. If we have enough community involvement, there are some areas that are doing it, like up in Cascade County and some other jurisdictions. And so I have had some requests for some public training, and that is just like a very basic emergency. I don't know if we will develop a CERT team from that because I don't know how much involvement people would want to have routinely every month. It would be great if we did have that, but I think that it would still be beneficial just to give people some idea of preparedness in the event that something does happen. Because, resiliency starts at the local point, at each family home. And so I think that the more people that can get some training and take interest in it, the better.
Okay. All right, Mr. Silk.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks, Lisa, for coming tonight. Question number 2, what are the most critical problems presently confronting the DES department?
Well, I don't know if any of you have had your TV on lately, but there's a lot of instability with the federal government right now, and FEMA's being targeted. And it has created a lot of uncertainty in Montana. I mean, everywhere, I suppose, but here throughout the entire part of Montana. It's just kind of threatening the foundational structure of emergency management, and so that is a concern. I do believe that the federal government is essential to set down some regulation and have all of the states training together in like fashion. I think it became apparent at 9/11 where everyone showed up. Their problem was big enough that they quickly exceeded their local resources, and everyone showed up to help, and no one spoke the same language. No one knew what their equipment didn't work together. And so that is an essential part of what the federal government is doing, is creating a framework that we're all training under so that we can work together more easily. And Montana's joined a task force with some other neighboring states. And I know MEMA has a meeting scheduled to meet with the governor's policy director in May relating to the future of emergency management in the state and the nation. So they're working to fix it, and that also has put a severe threat to grant funding. Grant funding is being paused and reformatted, and some of it's just been killed. There is a BRIC grant that I heard that they have disabled, which is an infrastructure grant for recovery. And they're no longer, the federal government, I guess, cut it. And I think they pulled back some of the grants that were already awarded. So that is a terrifying thing when you have a reimbursement grant that you think you have that money and then they're going to pull it back. Yeah, and so I guess I just don't know about funding going forward. Our department, they have an EMPG grant out there, and it's to help fund your program, 50% supplement your program. And over the last 10 years, we've been able to have half of our expenses supplemented between staffing and the operations of the EOC. And this year, we were cut back pretty significantly, and we're told that the next year it should be worse, and they don't know about the future of it going forward. And so I am concerned about the funding of our department and what that is actually going to mean, because I have a pretty small staff right now of 1. I'm very fortunate that she is a very smart person and a hard worker, and so I was lucky, as Dan was lucky when he had hired his person, which was me. And so, yeah, you kind of need at least 2 people because we have to, manage that facility and get the work done. So I guess on the other side, if our grants go away, there might not be so much paperwork. It is very highly administrative right now. And I've worked before in government grants, and I've never seen a department require so much paper. So there's a report for everything. So that's my major concern. How many have any notes here? Oh, and the other thing is just the staff turnover and retention challenges. It doesn't really affect my department directly, but being such a small staff and such a broad, goal of trying to, improve and train the whole organization and the community, that I work with other departments like the emergency or the public health emergency preparedness person. Since I was, I think the last 2 years, we're already on the 3rd person in that position. So I take the other one on trainings, like for continuity of operations trainings and things, and hope to build a team to help go around to the departments, because I just cannot be everywhere. So my goal was to build a team, and then she's gone. So we start with the next person, and then she's gone. So they did just hire someone. She's been there about a week now, and she seems awesome and great. So we will start again. And like, I don't know if Jason's still here. No, but he is the PIO for our department. He's the incident PIO. We do have Lindsay as a PIO also for Butte-Silver County, but she's more of a marketing PIO. And Jason has the FEMA training, plus he has military background, and he has volunteer fire background, and has all of those trainings associated with PIO responsibilities. So I appreciate the fact that he's been here. But and I also work with the safety and health coordinator, and he's awesome, and he's does great as a training coordinator. And so he's also been coming to a lot of the emergency management trainings, and I'm hoping to get him certified to be able to pull down some of these FEMA trainings, and then we can be much quicker to offer training classes. Right now, it takes about a year to bring a class actually to Butte, and he's just awesome, so.
Okay, follow-up questions. All right. Mr. Dennehy, can you take number 3?
Sure can. At least, and you're absolutely right, I was very lucky to have you there when I was there, so most of the good things happened because of your diligence, not because of me, so I appreciate that. What changes, if any, in the governmental structure, organization, or powers would help the disaster and emergency services
I don't know
address
about,
your critical problem? But what I'm getting at is specifically, and I know that you're never shy to hold back your opinions and your education and your smart sort of way you do things, is there's been a lot of prior information regarding the structure of our government. One, whether or not there should be a city-county manager versus a chief executive elected, city-county manager appointed, and whether or not the Council of Commissioners district should be lowered from its current 12 to another number that is less than that. And since you've been here for a while, we've asked this to all the department heads and elected officials, what's your opinion on that sort of structure, and do you see it as a benefit to the emergency management or a hindrance?
I guess as far as it being a benefit to the department directly, I'm not sure. You know, I've worked well with the commissioners and with the chief executive and now with his chief of staff. But I have been putting a lot of thought into this about the commissioners. I do think that we have too many commissioners. Not that I don't appreciate all the work that the current commissioners do. I just feel like after they work a full day and they're trying to learn everything and they're on all the committees and all the other meetings they attend, I think that it would be better to probably go to fewer, where they're more of a full-time position for the county. I do talk to some other people in the different, counties around the state of Montana, and when they hear we have 12 commissioners, people stop a little, and then I reason with them and I say, well, it's because we're incorporated, so it's just like, you guys have your county commissioners, you have your city commissioners, and they turn to me and say, but that's still just 5. And so I go, okay, you got me. So I think that if we had fewer of the commissioners, they'd still be able to manage and maybe even possibly better represent the constituencies out there, because they'd have more time at government to be able to work for them. As far as the chief executive goes, I was thinking about this also, and I was thinking that I've probably been here a long time where I think I've actually worked in one way or another with all the chief executives since Don Peoples. I started here when I think it was in '87, and I was working after school, helping them. It was when we had the big, huge book of computer numbers, and they were trying to get this information into a new accounting system or something, and so I just, in the evenings, went up and was punching it into their Linux system. And after that project was over, I moved on to another project and was working with the sidewalk program, and Then I went to the treasurer's office, and I was a tax clerk in the treasurer's office for a few years, so I was here through about 95, which would have brought us through Don Peoples, Dave Fisher, and Jack Lynch. And then I traveled about and went to the BLDC for 12 years, where the chief executives were on the board there for the BLDC, and so I've worked with Judy Jacobson and Paul Babb and Matt Vincent, and came on to Butte-Silver again in 2015 when Matt Vincent was chief executive. So I have to say, looking back, having worked with everyone, I don't really think we had a bad elected official. I think they were different from each other, but I don't think that one person makes or breaks a government, no matter what position that they're in. As far as continuity of government or continuity of operations, I think that if we were to document better and have some standard operating procedures, SOPs around for each of the departments, that's something for people to fall back on. And I do think, though, I like the hybrid version, where it's just too much work for one person to do everything, to manage the 500 employees and have day-to-day business interactions and do the ribbon cuttings and do the commissioning meetings and things. So I think a more robust chief of staff would be appropriate. And I thought that perhaps do that as a contract basis and have like clawbacks. I always kind of worry about the contract, where if you're stuck with someone, you get rid of them, you're still going to pay out the contract and have to hire someone else. So maybe have some, which would be Matt and Ruth's responsibility, I suppose, to maybe do it for 3 years where there's a clawback and we can terminate the contract if we needed to. But if it was going well, maybe have an automatic renewal for an additional 2 years and have like a 5-year contract where there's a little bit of an overlap between the chief executives and the chief of staffs, just to help also with the continuity of government.
Any follow-up questions? Okay, thank you, Lisa, for sharing your perspective and that long history of all the chiefs that you've worked with. Incredible. Mr. Steppen, can you take number 4, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lisa, what advice would you give to the study commission in terms of conducting a comprehensive and impactful review of the local government?
I have been watching online, so I know the things that you've been doing. I would encourage hiring a marketing person. You have your budget this year. I don't know if that renews the next year. So since you have, we're almost at the end of our fiscal year, I think that you probably have the funding, and I would take advantage of that. I think that Lindsay and Jason are just too busy to actually do what you would need them to do. I'm sure they would assist, but I think that would be a very good use of your budget. I think it's impossible to monitor social media, and I think you should be using, diversification of communications. So you would want to use all the social media platforms, and it'd be impossible to monitor all the comments and things on there without someone hired separate. And I think the only original thought I had, because you're already doing the radio, and you're doing the newspaper, and do the broadcast print, and maybe you do like bench ads or different things if you wanted to go to the service organizations. But I think the clerk and recorder's office, I think she's next. I don't know if they still do, but I think they have like Text My Gov or whatever it's called, and it is a service where people can opt in and receive communications kind of broadcast to their cell phones. And if they have only temporarily had that, I think that we might be getting it again in different areas, so it might be something to look into.
Excellent suggestions, thank you. Any follow-up questions? Okay. All right, number 6, Mr. Thielen.
We're on 6 or 5.
I am not on tonight, so I appreciate all of you. This team effort to make this meeting run well is great. Thank you. Let's go to number 5.
Rummy, though, so thank you, Madam Chair. Lisa, what inefficiencies could be addressed through changes of the local government structure?
Well, I kind of answered most of that with my last one, what I typed on here. I guess the only one that I didn't say is about the coroner. I heard you talk about the coroner. And I think ideally, I would keep that as an independent department, but it's not the most sought-after position. So I don't know what sort of, if you always have the correct candidates going for the position. So it would be nice for just the segregation of responsibilities to keep it separate so there's no conflict of interest. But I think it probably does make more sense to put it under the sheriff's department where we have, you know, staffs of the captains and things that could act as deputies. And there's always situations, especially in law enforcement, where something will come up that there is a conflict and you just excuse yourself and have another jurisdiction come in and cover for that particular thing. And I think I covered everything else that I have written, my notes.
I would agree. Thank you for that. Are there follow-ups to question 5? All right, how about 6, Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Lisa, again. What challenges do you foresee for Butte-Silver Bow in the next 10 to 20 years? And does the current government structure position the city-county to meet those challenges effectively?
Well, I think that we have an aging infrastructure, and the current structure of government being consolidated, I think that it's probably a less expensive form of government for the population because we also have an aging population. I don't know if, you know, we have a lot of the younger people moving here because we do have population growth as well, but it seems like between, you know, the population growing and the housing and the aging infrastructure, how to fund it. You know, right now I think that we're kind of going into a recession coupled with a lot of inflation with the federal government getting things worked out, and I just don't know how we would bring everything up fast enough, and so I think that that's just going to be a continuing issue. How to get ahead and fund all of the improvements. I think that other things that would be a problem is cybersecurity is getting to be an additional concern with AI and just ramping up attacks. And then also just I put staff retention again.
Excellent. Follow-up questions? We're rolling. Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Lisa, you bring up a good point. I'd like you to talk about cybersecurity because as far as an emergency goes, I mean, we've had incidents here in Butte-Silver Bow with regard to the school district, ransomware attacks, and trying to pay people, you know, pay to get your info back. Have you had any discussions with Butte-Silver Bow with regard to, I know people immediately think disaster and emergency services for, you know, a fire or an earthquake or, you know, natural disasters, but you make a great point when you bring up cybersecurity. What have you done or what can DES do to work with Butte-Silver Bow? Or have you already had those discussions on the increased security for the county itself, its money, its citizens, the taxpayers themselves? What can you give us any kind of sense of that? That's a good point you brought up.
My department has worked with IT about some challenges about, you know, aging infrastructure. Also, that's one that has to be constantly updated, and so we have gone out and applied for some grants and been successful. They're currently working on building up the infrastructure to help protect the data. You know, right now the Butte-Silver Bow network it's split between the EOC and the courthouse, and we want to take a step further. The IT department wanted to take a step further and put in the right sort of equipment, the switches, and I don't know a lot about it. I know enough maybe to write a grant with their help, but They put the infrastructure in there, and he's going to try to split it out into like a cloud, like some of the data in the cloud, and that would just be the ultimate way, or just, get it kind of out of Butte. And so that's just going to be a triple protection for our data in the event that there was ransomware or whatever, and they can keep doing these backups and restore from a point. The Butte-Silver Bow School District, that wasn't really a ransomware, that was a phishing, where it was like a what do they call that, social media, where they come in and they get your PII, they get you to answer questions one by one, and they finally trick somebody to give them enough information that they had them say that we've moved. Our information has changed, and so one person changed the vendor information, and then another person paid the bill, and it went to the wrong person. They didn't even know what happened until the vendor came and said, "Why haven't you paid us this money?" So that's different than ransomware. And Butte-Silver Bow does have a very strong educational program, I would say, for end user protection. And I have another grant application that I just submitted to get even more end user protection for Butte-Silver Bow, just to teach people what not to say, what not to do, what not to click. I think that the IT department has been very aggressive in making sure that they're, communicating all the information with people, and have us do these weekly tests, this 2-minute little test, and it stays current with the most recent, trends, the most recent scams that are out there. And I was emailed a training opportunity, which I forwarded to the IT department, and they took advantage of it, and they sent 2 of their employees to TEACS training, Texas Emergency something, TEACS. And they went there actually, and they were just thrown into the cyber incident, and they did this tabletop or whatever, and it was a lot of injects thrown at them, and they came back with their eyes opened, and right away started implementing changes. So I think that the IT department is doing a lot to keep Butte-Silver Bow secured. And as far as my involvement is, I've tried to help get them funding and find opportunities.
Follow-up?
Okay, one quick follow-up to that. Can you give us a sense, I don't even know if you know the answer to this, because what would the cost then be of, I'm just trying to figure this out in my head, of just protecting data? And if you're moving it to a cloud, or you're moving it and those kinds of things, I'm just trying to think structurally for Butte-Silver Bow and a flow chart. Is that something you would take on, or IT would take on? And I'm just thinking it's going to be very expensive, but I could be wrong. But do you know, any clue on that?
Well, I know that the infrastructure that they need is, a lot of it was covered with grant money, but they do have some budget. And I think that Jermaine, I've worked with him quite a bit, and I believe that he has enough. I guess I didn't ask him how much it would be, and because I think it's something through the state of Montana. And so he probably gets a little bit of a credit or leeway, because the state is working to get everyone to improve their cybersecurity posture. And there's a new grant program out there, the state local cybersecurity grant program, that's pretty new. And so a lot of this is being funded through that. And being that it's such a new program, they're constantly modifying and adapting it just to figure out how they should do this. So I think that of what he researched, it was the most affordable option. Because if you really think about it, it's probably worth the expense. And I have to say that was one more of the challenges I have. I have on here is trying to convince people to spend money on things you hope you never need. It's like people think we're wasting money. They say you don't use your emergency notification system enough. Why do you have the backup 911 center? When you haven't used it. Have you used it? And I just say, let's just be fortunate that we haven't had the situation that we had to use it. So that's another reason I'm concerned about the grants going the way that they're going. Hopefully we They just restructure, and they're still there for us because we have brought a lot of money in from these emergency preparedness grants over the last, few years, and over the last decade, probably close to $3 million just through our department over the last decade of bringing this emergency preparedness money in. And if we don't get it, then we still need to buy these things and find the money.
Okay, excellent. And then Ms. Casey, I think you get lucky question number 7.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Lisa, the last question is, what is the current rate of annual compensation for the Director of Disaster and Emergency Services Department and members of your department's professional staff? And the last part of that question is, do you believe these are fair?
I currently earn $80,350, and yes, I think it's fair. And my employee and the only one other person in the department, she is under the clerk's collective bargaining agreement. She's a clerk 3, and so that's just structured that way.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Ms. Carey? All right. Thank you so much for spending your time with us and jumping right in. So we appreciate you. Mr. Clark is here, so we'll be taking his presentation now, kind of going back into the top of our agenda if we could. Did you need to set up anything with PowerPoint or?
No, I think I brought some handouts. I can use a flip chart if I need to illustrate something, but other than that, you have my sparkling personality.
Perfect. Well, we appreciate you coming over tonight to present to us, and we do broadcast on YouTube, so I know that there's a lot of public interest in the topic at hand, so we're looking very forward to this presentation tonight.
Start pushing buttons. How's that? Oh, yeah. Two general topics that I was asked to discuss with you, and I'm happy to cover anything else you might want to chat about. One, size of commission, and the other is the option of a city manager or city county manager. So kind of exploring those two general concepts. Does that sound like what it is you want me to cover? Okay. Let's talk about size, the size of the commission. I think you're at 12 city county commissioners. I think the next largest commission in the state is in Billings, and they have 10 and an elected mayor. And then I think there's 7 or 9 out of Kalispell, and I think the rest of them are around 5 that are of the larger metros. So looking at and comparing at metro cities and counties, or those that have city manager form of government. We have a few commission executive forms of government that have up to 7 of the smaller jurisdictions. One at 5. I was just talking to one at 5 today, but they're discussing whether they should go to 4. So you're not the largest in the world, I'll tell you that. I know there's a county in New York I did some work with earlier that has 39. They call them legislators. So that's a thing. And they just kind of shake their head when they say that. They have a whole legislative process they go through. So it's like a mini state legislature, but in a county of about 340,000 people. So it's a fairly dynamic. I didn't hear anyone saying, gosh, everybody should be doing this. If you look at some of the research that surrounds the size of a deliberative body, a particular smaller board or a committee, they're saying that the effectiveness of a board is kind of optimized around 5 to 7. That they do say going up to 12, depending on the complexity of that board. So I'm not going to give you a clear answer, but I'm going to give you some points to consider as you're debating back and forth the size. So 5 to 7, they find that there's less ability to hide as a commission. If there's more, then I can step back and more people will get stuff done. They find that when there's 5 to 7, they're more fully engaged. There's opportunity for their voice to be heard and appreciated and incorporated. When there's more voices, it's harder to feel like you're being heard or you're contributing meaningfully to the conversation. I had a couple of other notes here I made. If you will bear with me as I pull that screen up. Yeah, the loafing, they call it loafing. Decisions can be more streamlined with 5 to 7. And if you get diverse opinions represented on that board, you can get good conversation. And there's probably a diminishing return with the more you have, the more nuancy that those varying opinions are, and it has a tendency to slow the process down. So I think 3 is a bit tight. 5 to 7 is pretty good. As you get higher than that, just recognize there's going to be some other, and as you're probably recognizing, there's some lag to the decision making. People are socially disconnected from the process. Smaller groups promote more collaboration, an environment where members feel more comfortable in sharing their ideas and perspectives when there's not as many. So you get more of that participation engagement. So those are just some of the thoughts. Well, and I guess I can answer questions too. Happy to do that. I don't know how formal you want to be.
Yeah. Mr. Dennehy?
Dan, thank you for coming tonight. We always appreciate the help that MSU Local Government Center has given to us. One of the things that we have been reviewing that in terms of a taxable valuation of over 50 million, there has to be 7 Council of Commissioners in our vernacular. Do you find that in your study that true, or are we reading it wrong? Or I know the county attorney is going to give us an opinion on that, but it kind of tells us in what direction we could be going from 12 to 9 to 7. If taxable valuation of 50 million is the number, then we are also limited ceiling to 7 members. Could you comment on that?
So that's a statute that you're referring to on that? So with your charter, my suspicion is that with your charter and self-governing powers, that you're not beholden to that number. That those that have general governing powers would be required to satisfy that. I think you have the flexibility to do what you want, and I'm saying that because I don't recall seeing any language relative to that in Title VII, Chapter 1, Part 1, which deals with those prohibitions or things that deal with the self-governing powers. So with things outside of that space, there's some, I'm a little more confident in saying that with your self-governing powers, you can do what's best for you.
Yeah. Ms. Casey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dan, I just wanted to follow up to Dan's question because this was under Chapter 3 of Title VII with the consolidation. And it seems there was 2 options to consolidate, either under option 1 or option 2. And option 2 had that minimum of 7 commissioners. And I guess I don't think, at least myself on this commission, know which option we consolidated under.
Well, I did a deep dive in both of those about, 2 months ago. Gone. So, but at this point, it really doesn't matter because you created a charter and self-governing powers. So those, if you are going to be consolidated and retain general governing powers, that's the recipe you would have to follow. Does that make sense? So since you opted for the self-governing powers, created a charter, you can supersede anything that's written in those option 1 and 2. But they do serve as a very helpful guideline for you as you're trying to structure to account for both the municipal function and the county function. So it helps you bridge that. But so you can incorporate aspects of those 2 options into your charter that make sense, but you're not beholden to those things that are written there. It's the beauty of self-governing powers.
Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Dan, for being here tonight. I just wanted just to clarify, when you're talking the optimums 5 to 7 commissioners, those are full-time. Because right now we have 12 part-time commissioners, but you're talking in essence full-time, is that correct?
I'm not making a distinction on the full-time or part-time, and that can be up to your determination. How much workload do you feel that they have, and what would be justified on that? If you look at, Great Falls or Billings, they're not, so Great Falls has 4 city commissioners and an elected mayor. So they're operating in the legislative branch with 5 members. And they don't have offices in City Hall. They are just, they come like any other community. They show up the night of the meeting. They have lots of other meetings and responsibilities they have during the week, but they are not considered full-time. They all have full-time jobs or are retired. And so, 65,000 people is the size of the city of Great Falls. So you can determine, right, and that's again one of those those things that are at your discretion. If you feel like it would be helpful to have an expectation for responsibilities and duties of a council member, and that would require a time commitment and remuneration that comes along with that, then you can go down that path. Again, that flexibility is up to you, and I think that would be a great point of conversation and debate amongst you and the community around that. Now, I will say that Bozeman is also considering. So Bozeman's operating with 4 commissioners and an elected mayor. That, again, the mayor is not an executive function. They're still part of the legislative body in their forms of government. And there has been some discussion amongst their study commission that they would like to see more commissioners and more responsibilities. There's a rationale there that I've heard communicated. I haven't heard lately if they're still on this, but some of that communication was that they would like to have a more diverse group of people that have an expectation to spend more time engaging the public in their representative role, and so there's a greater time commitment, and they think they would like to have more people on there. Whether that plays out in the long run and whether the citizens of the community decide that that's a good plan or not, but there is that interesting conversation going on. So they're one of the few that are thinking getting bigger. Most of them, like yourselves, are thinking, how do we get smaller? I think Billings, I've heard some peripheral conversation around folks there, not anything formal or so I don't want to speak out of turn, but it's just conversations I've heard in that community. It's like, wow, we've got a lot. So, and I think likewise with you. Wow, we've got a lot.
Mr. Thielen, and then I'll take Ms. Shaw. Excuse me, Mr. Steppen. I'm telling you, we're off tonight.
All bald people look alike.
A new shampoo, right?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think. Dan, thank you. It had been talked about, and I think Ms. Carey brought it up in her presentation, that one thing that continues to be mentioned with respect to the size of our commissioners is how we're unique in our we're consolidated city-county government. So when you're talking about Billings, Kalispell, Great Falls, are those city commissioners, are they county commissioners, or is that a combination of the two?
They're all city. Yeah, so they're city commissioners of municipalities that are like, Great Falls is 110,000, I think now. Kalispell's about 35,000. Great Falls is about 65,000. I'm trying to remember what your population now is. 35. So giving comparable in size and complexity of infrastructure and those things. Now you do have, you've got your core and then you've got your rural areas. So there's a little bit different plate that this commission serves. But with your charter gives you the ability as a commission here to apply the municipal rules, if you will, and powers of a municipality, which are greater than a county, you can apply those countywide. And those things are going on that have the powers for counties, you can use countywide, inside and outside, right? There's no distinction. So you get the benefit of operating with both of those set of powers where it makes sense and where it applies in your jurisdiction. So that's kind of a fun thing with your consolidation. You get that ability. I don't know where I was going with that, but interesting information nonetheless. Did that somewhat answer your question?
It did, thank you.
Yeah.
Ms. Shaw?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Steppen stole my thunder, and I wasn't asked the same thing, but I remember back during consolidation, we had 3 county commissioners, and I think it was 9 aldermen, and that's how we ended up with 12 people, but we had 50,000 people back in the 70s, I believe, somewhere around there. So I was just wondering the same thing, you know, if we're talking apples to apples, if you see Kalispell has 7 and 9, Billings had 10, that's just city.
Yeah.
And then they do Heather County, which is a whole separate government entity, I assume.
Yeah, and I think of all this as a grand experiment. And in 1974, when the study commission was going through and considering the consolidation and how is this going to look, they thought, well, we have 9, we have 3, let's combine them and we'll have 12. And so now, in subsequent study commissions, I don't recall, and it was probably discussed, but I haven't seen in any of my research that the issue has ever come up on the ballot. So the question's never been asked. And so again, you keep, and that's what I like about the voter review. Every 10 years, we get a chance to reevaluate and say, is that experiment that we started back in 1976 when we adopted this still working for us? And it made sense at the time, and it could have been one of those brokered deals, right? In order for this to be politically acceptable by the electorate at that time, it made sense to make, and so now, there's not many people around that were here in 1974 that were really passionate about that point of consolidation, that let's have another conversation about it. And is this experiment that we're engaged in still working? And I think this is one of those points of interest or points of study or review is size, and some of the other things, should we retain having an elected commissioner or should we go to a professional manager, right? Again, it's a point of review, and is that experiment that we've been engaged in still working for us? I apologize for being late because I was talking with another community about their proposed charter and reviewing and I was saying, well, you have something in your charter that is different than what a majority of the other municipalities have. It's not right or wrong. And if it's working for you, great. But other communities operate this way. So maybe that's something, it at least gives you something to respond to. And we can evaluate and say, well, others do it this way. Is it working for them? Because there's no 100%, wow, that's just beautiful, it's elegant, and there's no cause of concern. I'm sure each of these areas or points of interest, there's a pro and a con to it. And I think as you discuss it, and then if you decide to make a change, you're well aware that this may not be the best plan because there's some weaknesses to it, but there's some other advantages. And you're making a conscious decision. We're going to try these other options and see how that works. And you have 10 years to try it out. Actually, by law, you have 3 years to try it out. Then if you really don't like it, you say, let's go back. You can do a mid-cycle, put it back on the election and say, let's unwind that was a bad idea. But again, you wouldn't know, other than just an academic exercise, that you guys sitting around here thinking, gosh, we really think this would be beautiful, and it's maybe not. Or vice versa. Wow, that turned out way better than we thought it would. Oh, it gets exciting. I envy you guys, but anyway.
So in the description of the districts, we could decide if we set up districts or we set up all at large or some hybrid of the two, correct?
Yeah, and I apologize, I didn't pick it up on it when I read. Are you now at large, or you have
We have districts.
Okay, yeah. So you can do a combination of that, where you can you can divide up the county and say 5 districts, where you have 1 individual elected from each district and then 2 elected at large. You can do that. So you can play around with that representation. So part of it, I think that's really what Bozeman is looking at, is they've had at-large elections for a bit of time now. And what they have found is historically, all the elected representation has come from the downtown core, about a mile square. You could probably put a pin on all the residences of the last councils and mayors for the last 30 years, 20 years have all been in that downtown corridor. All of them been homeowners. And they're thinking, you know what, our town is growing, we have more diverse challenges and issues that we're facing, we have a whole western side that those folks don't feel like they have any representation. Now, on the flip side, no one from the west side of the city has ever filed to run for office. So it's not like they've been beaten out by the core establishment. But they're thinking, would we get a different representation if we pushed those and forced someone to have to be elected from that area so that they feel that lived experience? If you live in the downtown core of Bozeman, there may not be much need for you to travel around on the west side. Unless you work there, you know, or have friends there. So your lived experience of having to commute and having to deal with construction, whatever's going on out there, it's like, this is not your lived experience. We see this every day, and I want someone representing me that sees this every day. There's some value to that, right? But the downside is what if you just struggle to find anybody in that side of town to run? Because they've never been barred from it before, but they just haven't done it.
Mr. Thielen.
Madam Chair, the other bald guy, he speaks. Dan, thank you. Yeah. Hey, just a quick question. So in your professional opinion, do you think that the charter form of government is better than a city-county government, or vice versa?
So your charter so think of your charter as your local written constitution. And that's where in that charter so we'll just say that, it's your written constitution versus the general governing powers, which is what you would have to follow, exactly what's scripted in the Montana Code Annotated. So that is somewhat rigid. They give you a little bit of flexibility, but this is what the MCA says, general governing powers, whatever is there is what you are. What you, as a city county did back in the 70s is decide, no, we're going to jump over here, we're going to create our own unique structure of government. We're going to take input and insights from what the legislature had in the MCA, and we're going to create our own charter. We're going to define the legislative branch, we're going to define the executive branch, and all the other administrative functions of the city county. And we're going to, in that charter, we're going to give the local government the authority to create any other, by ordinance, any other structures and authorities that they might feel like they need to exercise. So I think for you folks, that's a preferred alternative. And so I think what you're doing, historically what you've been doing with this self-governing powers and a charter, I think works well for you. And I think you would be less satisfied if you were to go back to what does the law specifically say, and we'll just follow that structure. Did that answer your question? So I think, yeah, so I think where you're at, I think maintaining the charter, I guess I'm supposed to be unbiased here. But my profession, I think you're in the right spot. I think what you've got is pretty good, and I think you're still, as times change, as needs change, as we evolve as a society, having this 10-year review is very helpful for you to look at how are we structured. This is the conversation you were having earlier, right? How are we structured? Is it still working for DES? Is there something that we need to tweak to make our ability to be responsive to an emergency? Is there something that's within our space of concern, right? Is there something in the charter that's preventing DES from being effective? Now, there might be something within the operations of the city that needs to be dealt with that's beyond your scope. Your scope is really look at the structure. If there's not the right people, or we don't have enough people, that's kind of beyond your scope. But really, is there something structurally that needs to be addressed? And I think the powers, you're in the right spot for powers, and I think having a charter in the right spot, I think now it's just tweaking that language and what that looks like.
Ms. Dolan?
Thank you. So Dan, we've had numerous department heads come in and talk about their functions and everything. Could you give us your opinion with regard to how, I don't know, vague might not be the correct word, but as a charter, not to get too specific? We've had that conversation, so I'd like your opinion as to how broad we should be versus how specific we should be when it comes to detailing those official actions and everything. And I got that from Lori talking to my neighbor to my left.
Yeah. So in a charter, I'm a fan of having a more general charter than a very specific charter. Because the general charter gives more flexibility for the operations side of things to be more nimble. We're going to give general authority and power and expectations, and then allow the current council or commission and executive to figure out how are we going to operationalize that. Just like our state constitution, it's 72 pages long. This whole state is operating on a 72-page document. Now, the legislature meets and say, all right, now how are we going to operationalize that 72-page document? And that's where we have the MCA. It's a big collection of books. And so I see that similarly, right? We want to provide general powers and structure and expectations, and then allow, as our legislature today is making decisions and either adding to the operations within the power granted by the Constitution to be responsive to today's needs, or reforming something that was decided back in '82 that is it's now antiquated. We're not quite hitting the mark. At the time, it was great, but we have evolved past that, and it's now needs to be revisited. So I like that concept where it's kind of the operations of the city and the county can evolve based on the legislative branch, engaging the public and the staff, and with the input from the chief executive. What do we need to tweak to be more responsive? Is there something that's preventing us? Is it a personality thing? Is it a lack of funds? Do we need to exercise an authority that we haven't quite exercised? So I'm a fan where it says, I'd rather see in a charter that if there are a vacancy of elected office will occur on the happening of, and then it might list out. And it may mirror exactly what the MCA says. Okay? That's what I would say is very specific. Now, what if the MCA changes and adds another one or two things to their list of reasons why an elected seat would be vacant? You're stuck with having your list and not able to access those other additional options because you hadn't anticipated them, and now you've got to wait for another voter review and decide, do we want to add those two things or not? So what we'll typically find is there is the list in the MCA that we like that list, and if there's something that you would like to add locally to that list, what you would do is say a vacancy would occur as provided by law and with these additional reasons, and then you add your specific reasons. So you have everything that's in the law, and anything when the law changes, you get those as well, plus whatever additional things you want to have locally. And so you'll often see that throughout charters is that they'll have something that's specific to their community and then as provided by law. So they're also, and I'm not a fan of putting statute in there. Instead of 7414111, which is the vacancy list, because what if they change the statute and then that's no longer relevant? So I like that as provided by law. So you're referring back to the MCA, and then you're adding anything in addition. So that general with your specifics added to it. And I like what the MCA has because you're referring to it, and it gives you sideboards. You don't have to sit as a elected commission to come up with all those answers, but you're saying, hey, look, we like what it says in the code. There's nothing wrong with what the MCA says, so we like what it says, and then if we want to put our embellishment on it, you can. hoping that made sense. I don't have a, but yeah, to the question, fan of the more general, allow the local folks to make those changes by ordinance and resolution, and they're making the general expectations in the charter.
Was there anything to add with the discussion about the number or size of commission? Do we want to move on to the city manager topic?
Yeah, I'm going to grab my Diet Coke just to keep me going. So in your packet, what I've done, in anticipating this, and I haven't done this yet, so I appreciate the invitation to have this discussion. So what's the basis, right? Where do we go to as a study commission? So again, I'd much rather have something for you to look at and respond to than creating something out of whole cloth, right? So without any input, we're just going to try to create what this looks like, and that's a lot of energy. So what I like to do, because I'm at heart lazy, so like, other people have, struggled over this, and they figured it out, and it's evolved over time. So getting their advantage, getting the benefit of their experience. So two things I did in your packet on the left-hand side. What I did is I went through and found in the Montana Code reference to a manager, and what are the duties of the manager, and how do you select the manager, and then. And so I put that in there, so that's a basis. And then I put a bunch of charters in here of those charters that have a manager. And I will say that some municipalities in their charter, let me see, maybe some municipalities that have a manager, not all of them have charters. Okay, so Livingston. Lewistown has a charter. Livingston does not have a charter, so they're operating right out of the code. And what they have is they have an appointed manager, and then they have 5 council members. And their council selects a chairperson. And so that chairperson is not the mayor, they're just the chairperson. They run the meeting, they help pull together the agenda along with the manager, and they have some minimal executive function, right? They may appoint, with the consent of the rest of the commission, the board members, that type of thing. But by and large, it's just a member of the legislative body that serves in this role, and it's by ordinance, and they select a new one every year. Other municipalities chose to have a manager and then a mayoral position. So mayor is still a member of the legislative body, but they have the title of the mayor, and they have, and they may be elected at large, where the others are elected by districts. And that person's more of a figurehead for the community. They represent the community. So you got a conference in town, and they say, hey, let's get the mayor down to welcome us at the conference. No one wants to ask a manager, a bureaucrat, to come and welcome, right? They want to get the charismatic mayor who won an election and represents the people, and we want them to come and give us a welcome. So they usually have that individual who serves as a ceremonial head of the city, but then the administrative, executive functions of that city is operated by the professional manager. So I'm presenting that as 2 options as you're looking at how do we want to set this up. You could have 7 elected officials or 6 elected officials with a mayor. So you'd have a total of 7. The mayor runs the meeting, and you can choose whether the mayor runs the meeting and votes along with them or only votes to break a tie. I think the mayor of Billings is basically a member of the legislative body because they're not in the executive, but their only vote is to break a tie. So he just runs the meeting and he's the figurehead, but other than appointing board members and getting the consent of the council, which is a political option or operation, it doesn't do much. So what I've done in this first handout is I start out with what the statute says about duties of the manager, how that manager is appointed, and then I cut and pasted for you the sections from other charters of how they go about the selection of their mayor, what their duties are. And you'll see there's just nuances and a little bit changes with each of those charters. So my intent was to give you a variety of options that allows you to debate. You might say, oh, I really like this thing about what Belgrade does here, and I like that wording they do here in Billings, and oh, in Great Falls, this little point here is really nice. And you can cobble together from these other jurisdictions what might be, the best for you folks. And I figured putting it in one handout might be helpful versus, and I also gave you a bunch of other charters, not all of them, but a bunch of other charters of the commission manager form of government around the state that you can look at and see maybe language for other aspects of what they wrote in their charter, the language they chose to use. And you might say, ooh, I like that language is more elegant than our language. Our language might be a little cumbersome, and so this would be a way to tighten it up a little bit or clarify it. So that was my intent with making these handouts. That was my Sunday afternoon, by the way. It was a great time hanging out in my office doing all this. Yeah, I guess other than that, so you've got a couple choices to look at that, and having the list of responsibilities or duties. You can start with the duties and responsibilities of your chief executive, and look, are there other duties and responsibilities that other managers have from other, either from the code, the MCA, or from other charters that could add to your chief executive role, or and then that could be the role of the manager. Yeah, I guess that's probably a good spot now. If you have specific questions, maybe we can go around that, and then, but that's how to understand this packet, and that there's different ways in which you can select, either have no mayor, no chief, mayor. You're not used to using the term mayor here, however.
Right.
So you can figure out what you want to, but chief executive also represents the person that has the power of the purse, So I've thought about that. It's like, what kind of term do you use that might, unless you get okay with the term mayor or, presiding officer? I don't know.
Okay, Mr. Dennehy, and then I'll go to Ms. Shaw.
Dan, in our discussion, at least the way I was thinking about it, and in your handouts previously from the local government, MSU Local Government Center, one of the things that hits me very hard is the balance of power.
Yes.
The balance of power between the chief executive and the balance of power between the council of commissioners, the legislative branch versus executive branch. We don't go much into the judiciary branch. They're pretty much state function, and that is another branch of government.
Yeah.
In your estimation and as your experience at MSU for these years, have you seen a abdication of the duties of the chief executive or mayor to the council of commissioners because of the balance of power that has shifted? So if you are a contract, or you're going to have a contract with a city county manager, which is a contract which the city council of commissioners is editing, creating. Does that balance of power shift so that the city manager now is, for all good intentions, a employee of the city council? So you lose the balance of power of the executive branch and provide that with a stronger legislative branch. Have you seen problems with that, or have you seen a fairly decent sort of, I guess, transition from that?
It's a good question. And talking about transition from the elected mayor to a city manager, and the one that comes to mind was the city of Polson when they did this 20 years ago, I want to say, and maybe 30 years ago. But it was a rocky road. It was 30 years ago. It was a rocky road. The first 10 years, it went through like 4 managers as everyone's trying to get their footing, trying to figure out what does this look like. And the elected legislative branch was struggling because it wasn't necessarily supported by the city government when they made the change. The voters wanted it. So the transition was a bit rocky. But they finally, enough attrition to where people were coming on and starting to recognize it. So after about 10 years, then they stabilized. It went from having 4 in 10 years to like 2 in 20 years, or three managers in 20 years. So that's stabilized their structure of government. So now, that's in that transition. So just know that anytime you're going to go through some sort of a transition, it's going to, your typical forming, norming, storming, or forming, storming, norming, performing kind of thing. It's going to be a challenge. In the balance of power, so with an elected chief executive, you can have differences of vision between the council and the elected chief executive of what they want to have done. They make their decision about the policy, and then you're dependent upon that individual to implement the policy. And their vision of how that policy implementation may look different than the council. So that could create some friction. You may have seen that off and on over the years, that there's just some tension there. And that's not necessarily a bad idea or a bad thing. You may lose some of that tension, or if you do, it gets to a point where a majority of the council says, look, we have a vision. This is what we want you to do. We've hired you to implement our vision. And if you can't do it, we'll find someone else who will. So there is that, I'm going to conform with that manager form. So I'm going to take your vision and I'm going to implement it. So is that a better thing to have a vision or to have 2 competing visions at times that may create some tension to maybe get to a point where we're getting a hybrid or maybe a better vision? I don't know. There's always that potential, right? But there is some of that tension. And so if I had my flip charts here, if you remember, I like my flip charts, I draw those 2 circles of the executive legislative branches that are overlapping. And so you can also define how much of that overlap exists, where you're giving how much autonomy do we want to give to that manager, and how much oversight do you want to have the legislative branch have on that position. And so you can determine that and how much overlap you want to have in your charter, or how much separation. It's easier to think about it with your elected chief executive, right? And so I think I would probably still consider, you've heard the term weak mayor, strong mayor. Heard that before? I don't like that term, but it's a common term. Strong mayor, and I'd like to say a strong mayor or strong council is a little bit better. So if you were to look at a balance of power in elected form of an elected chief executive, the commission executive form that you folks have, you have, almost. just missed it. It's, 3 days from now, I'm sure it'll be on this side as the sun changes on the horizon. What was I saying? So that it overlap. So it may say that you could have in your charter that well, typically for a commission, here's one, the commission manager, where the manager is solely responsible for the hiring and administrating of all the staff, hires, disciplines, fires. So your only employee and the only role that you have in directing staff is through the manager via policy. It's very clear that the commission is not going to be doing an end run around their employee and directing staff. And so that's spelled out both in the MCA and I think in every one of these charters, they're making it clear. You've got the hand on, what is it, Spock? It's got you want to take the, go right in. You got the con. It's your baby. We've made our decision, we got our vision, you got to implement it. We've given you the resources to make that happen. You control who you hire, who works for you under the policy that we create. So that's a real separation, right? So that, in that respect, those are the two circles butt up next to each other. In the elected chief executive, it may be that the chief executive hires department heads with the consent of the council. I don't recall if that's in your charter or not, but that's where you're sharing in that power, right? So there's an overlap on those circles. The chief executive prepares the budget in consultation with the council. That's an overlap. Usually with the manager, the manager typically prepares the budget and presents it to the council. And then the council then can modify and change it. So there's not a lot of budget meetings that are going on. It's like the manager's going to figure out. Or you can have the manager prepares the budget in consultation with the commission. Typically what happens is they'll sit down and have a joint, I do this with several of the city manager forms of government. They have a joint visioning and goal setting session. We did one in a large metro city about 2 months ago and outlined their set of goals. And the manager says, great, we had the department heads and the manager and the commission working together to figure out what are our priorities for the next 3 or 4 years, and now create the budget that reflects those priorities. Bring it back to us and we'll decide whether your vision as an executive branch aligns with our vision. At the end of the day, the commission still has the control over defining that before they adopt it. They don't have to accept it as is. They can modify it and amend it, and then they can still have it reflect their vision. Is that helping? Absolutely. Yeah. So you can have some of those things, those overlap, and so you can decide where do we want to have that overlap. But typically in the commission manager form, there isn't a veto. The manager doesn't veto, the mayor doesn't veto, there's no veto in that structure. Where you, and I don't know if you have it in your, does the chief executive have veto power? Yeah. So you kind of lose that check and balance between those. And it could be overridden, right? There's that interplay between those two spheres. And you typically, because you don't want to have a manager vetoing. What are you? You're an employee. You're not going to veto us. That's clearly you're not concerned about your contract if you want to veto one of our measures.
Ms. Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm gonna go off on a total different rabbit hole here. And of course, we're all neutral here. We're trying to just get information, and we thank you so much for being here. I mean, I always feel much more educated every time Dan comes to speak to us. Over the years, I've done that with him. What I'm getting at is cost. I personally, I think there's really good features and things that we could really, obviously we can expand on our government and everything else and have goals that can be taken care of by a manager and also by an elected official. I was a commissioner under 4 different chief executives, and they were all had their own, ways about doing things, and that was okay. I always called them adventures, and it was good. You learn to work with that, but there's that continuity thing that we've been hearing from a lot of our department heads, where that lack of continuity from every 4 years, you never know. I always say it's a box of chocolates in a way, just you don't know what. Same with commissioners too, I'll say that. But of the 6 cities, major cities, we're like the least rich, I guess you could call it. We're more conservative. We have, as far as economics go. And so to me, the bottom line has always been in this conversation is the cost. What it would cost to have a manager, and even if we reduced our commissioners down to, let's say, 7 and made them full-time, in that combination. So I just wanted to get your feeling about that. We've talked about this before, but to me, that is like basically the bottom line. And we want to put something out there, and after we've done our review and had as much public as we can get to speak, is to present something that people will actually vote for. There's no point in having a amendment recommendation if people aren't going to think that that's a good thing to do. So anyway, there I go.
Great questions, and a lot of this may depend on, it may be a non-starter if you start shopping around the idea in some of your community, listening sessions, the idea of having a manager versus a elected chief executive. That might be a non-starter for the public, to where you don't feel like you're getting any energy around that concept, or it might be just the reverse. I'm just going to quickly. So another resource for you I just thought of is publications. communications. The Montana League of Cities and Towns just came out with a survey, a salary survey. 2024 salary survey. I'm going to see if I can pull it up real quick. And so we can kind of get a sense of what some of the other city managers are getting paid in Montana. So I think if you're looking nationwide, the turnover rate for a manager, a city or county manager, is about 3 to 4 years, right? So you're not that far off on the national average from having an elected chief executive. However, in Montana, it's like 10 years. So we have a lot more longevity. For whatever reason, our city managers stick around. So, for example, Kukulski, his first name escapes me right now. So he was the manager in Kalispell, and then moved to Bozeman, and he was there for 12 years, and then now he's in Billings, and he's been there for 4 or 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, something like that. So he's been in the state. He's just moved around. Greg Doyen, who's in Great Falls, has been there 12, 15 years. The manager that took over for Chris Kukulski in Kalispell, he's been there ever since. So it's been 15 years. So we have a history of longevity with our managers here because it's such a nice place to live. That's why I'm sticking. And, yeah, I'm sticking with that one. Their salary ranges, so you've got the smallest municipality that has an elected chief exec, or I'm sorry, as a manager is West Yellowstone, population 1,200. And he's probably in excess of 100,000. I don't know what your chief executive gets paid now, and I don't know what your commissioners get paid. It may be, you know, and your budget's probably, what, $25 million? Anybody know off the top of your head? Yeah, the Butte-Silver Bowl.
Madam Chair, I believe and Mr. Commissioner O'Leary might know better, but I believe it's around 130 to 150 million.
Yeah.
It's quite a bit, yeah.
It's quite a bit.
North
So-
of the 50, yeah.
Yeah.
I
And
don't-
you know, so on all that, I'm sure has good use, you know, all that 100 million or whatever it is being well deployed and having a meaningful, but all of it comes down to priorities. How do we want to prioritize what we do and how we want to invest our funds and what kind of return are we going to get on that? I would say the Billings and Bozeman are probably one of the highest paid people, you know, getting up there that with all the other packages, they get housing stipends, they get car stipends, it's a whole thing. And they have a severance, you know, package that's been negotiated into their contracts. So they're well taken care of, but they work super hard for what they do. And they're probably in that between 150 and 200,000. West Yellowstone's probably in the low 100s. We did a back of the napkin, it wasn't anything we were gonna feel comfortable about publishing, but we did go through and look at can you hear that? I'm just way over here out of the sun, but maybe you stand over here, is that any better? No. We looked at what was it, the per capita. So we took the total funds appropriated and divided it by per capita. And then we tried to compare what those, and it was mostly in class 2 municipalities that had, so we have some class 2 municipalities that have a mayor and some that have a chief executive. I'm sorry, a manager, right? So comparing an elected chief executive to the manager. We were finding in that scenario, those that had the manager had a lower per capita, total funds appropriated per capita than those that had the elected. Yes. So the professional, now, and I think if you were to do some more, I haven't done some research on this lately, it's been a decade now, I don't remember, but it seems like the ICMA, which would be the International City County Managers Association, the Association of Cities and County Managers, they advocate for this, right? And they've done a lot of research looking at the efficiency that you have with a professional versus an elected person. And that it is cheaper because you have someone there that's the continuity issue, there's an alignment of vision, and what you'll have with an elected, what we have found with electeds, chief executives, is those department heads will kind of, all right, you're here for 4 years. we'll see when you'll cycle out and we'll see. So there's a little bit of a subtle shift. The powers down to those department heads rather than with the chief executives, because I've been here for 20 years. I know where the bodies are buried. You're just coming in and out. So there's a little bit of a balance of power. So the staff have a tendency to have a little more influence and power in those environments because they know you won a popularity contest and you may be out of here in 4 years. With the manager, it's like, okay, this is business and there's some matrix and we're using KPIs to evaluate my performance and, anyway. So it's just a subtle difference in some of those things. Now, in my little study, we found that. Here's the problem with a lot of our second-class cities that we're doing comparison. A lot of them, or that have managers, they also have a resort tax. And so it blows that out of the water because their total funds appropriated is so much higher because of the resort tax. So we excluded those with the resort tax, like Whitefish, West Yellowstone. We excluded them, so we're just looking at apples and oranges. So we're looking at Livingston, Lewistown, they'll have managers, Miles City, Havre. I think Polson has a manager, right? So we're looking at some of those that are comparable that don't have that extra income from the resort tax. And we were finding in Montana too, it was a savings. Why? I don't know. And this is where it's not publishable, but it was just a quick back of the napkin. What does this look like? And that's what we're finding. And it'd be interesting to delve into why. And I don't know, I'm talking a lot, don't know if I'm answering your question. But I just pulled it up. Yeah, if you wanted to go and look at that salary survey and see what they're getting paid.
Mr. Steppen, you had a follow-up?
I did. It was actually related to the average tenure of a city manager. So thank you. You answered that. But I do have another question, and I'll take us back to the charter versus non-charter conversation. And the way that you explained it, or at least the way I interpret it, was with self-governing powers and with a charter, you set the parameters within your community that take precedent over MCA. And I think that's 2.03 charter supremacy within our charter. There are instances, and if you've paid any attention to some of the more contentious issues in Butte-Silver Bowl right now, where state law does supersede our charter. Can you talk about when and why?
In a nice way? Want to qualify it that way? Yeah. So briefly, when you're saying that, what reminded me, if you were to drop your charter, you could still retain your self-governing powers, but your structure would revert back to option 1 or 2. So whatever it says there, that's what you'd have to be. So whatever creative or nuanced or Butte-Silver Bow specific things you have in your charter that aren't found in option 1 and 2 would go away. So you could still have self-governing powers, but you would have to adopt that structure of government. For example, Wolf Point. Wolf Point has self-governing powers, no charter. They just operate with the commission executive form of government that's spelled out in the law. So what it says there and the options they have, they've selected those options and that's what they have. And to be honest with you, most other municipalities, particularly the small ones, they just took that structure of government that's outlined in the statute and migrated into their charter, just word for word. So they really don't look any different than they did before when they were operating as, say, the commission executive form of government. That's just now enshrined in their charter. Okay, I wouldn't recommend that. I think what you have is something that's specific to you and your needs and your issues and what your citizens want. And so I think retaining your charter would be preferable to going to a regular statutory structure with just self-governing powers. Now, to the things that aren't available or aren't in your sandbox, so to speak. As a study commission, you've got a sandbox, a decision-making space that you can operate in and customize as you want, except for this little space where the legislature says, look, we are reserving to the state these issues, and they're not part of the shared sovereignty that self-governing powers cities and counties have with the state. So self-governing powers, it was very eloquently stated by a Supreme Court justice in 1989 in reference to a Madison County lawsuit. Anyway, but they used the language that those cities or counties with self-governing powers have shared sovereignty with the state, except for when the state prohibits certain options or certain things for the municipalities or counties. So they said, look, you can exercise any power except for these things we've prohibited from you from exercising. Is it making sense? Those things that they are prohibiting from you stepping in and adding that to your sandbox are usually those things, or historically, we'll say historically been those issues or those things that you might want to do, but have a state relevance. For example, election laws. They've said, look, election laws in the state of Montana are reserved to the state. We will decide what the election laws, and so they will be consistently applied in every jurisdiction across the whole state. You can imagine what it would look like pretty quickly. If every jurisdiction decided to create their own election laws, it would be a nightmare. So same with zoning and land use planning. So basically Title 76 that deals with land use planning, the state says, look, we were reserving that to the state. We're making decisions as a state about that. Every jurisdiction will comply. So those are things that you can't modify land use planning within your charter. That's a prohibited thing. And there's other things like the operation of ham radios in vehicles and the erection of a ham radio antenna. That is something that you can't regulate as a self-governing powers government, because the state says that is part of our emergency response infrastructure as a state. And we can't have every jurisdiction say, nope, you can't put your antenna that high and you can't operate in a car. No, that is not something you can locally regulate. So those are the things that make sense for the state to say, we share in sovereignty with you, but there are certain things that make sense for the benefit of everyone that we're going to retain that power and authority, and we're not going to give you the ability to modify that locally. So there's that long list, and there's some argument now with the things that they're adding to that list, whether that is really a statewide need or interest. That's debatable, but they have stepped into that space, and they're expanding that circle of things that are not in your sandbox. And until someone pushes back in the legislature, said, what's the state interest in this? Because clearly that's, it could be argued that that issue is a local issue and needs to be determined locally, and that there isn't a statewide interest on it. And until local governments assert that and push back on them, they'll continue to step into that space and make their area of bigger and your sandbox smaller. So I often say all the cool, fun things you might want to do are on that list of prohibited things. But it's not a bad, and you never know the thing that's going to pop up. That's like, oh, great, we can deal with that. Or the state statute that provides guidance, say either acquiring or disposing of some of the county's land. Their general governing powers has a long process you got to go through. You can modify. That's not one of those things that's prohibited. You can modify that. You can create your own ordinance saying, hey, in Butte-Silver when we have some public property we want to dispose of, here's the way we're going to do it. And as long as you feel like it's fair and equitable and that the public can have equal access to be able to bid on whatever, you define that process rather than following what the state has. And I think those are some of the cool things that you can do on your own. That it's like, yeah, do you do a salary a compensation committee as part of the county, or I don't think you do. Counties, if you're a pure county, they have by law what they call a compensation committee. It's made up of members of the county, elected officials, so staff, elected officials, and members of the community. They create a committee and they decide what the compensation schedule for the county is. I think it's a huge pain in the butt. Can I say that? Bottom, huge pain in the bottom. And so there's a handful of counties like Fergus County. That was the first thing that they did when they got self-governing powers, is they said, we're going to determine by ordinance salaries, the commission will. We're not going to fuss around with this it takes 9 months for this committee meeting before the budget to come up with what other salaries it's going to be. We're going to cut that out. Good or bad, I don't know. But that's how municipalities operate. That's probably how you operate, you just determine by ordinance what the salaries are going to be, and it's part of the budget package. Counties have a whole other process they go through before it gets to the budget package. Is that helping?
I think so, yes. And Mr. Clark, I'm going to take us back to the city manager question. And I do realize that we have people that are waiting to present too, so I want to make sure that we stay kind of moving forward with all the questions that the commission might have for you tonight. One of the questions that I have in regards to establishing a city manager, you kind of alluded to this when you talked about the department heads, that sometimes power, if you will, or transparency, or appearance of lack of transparency comes from sometimes those department heads will take over jobs and do things and give the appearance to the public that not necessarily everything is happening with the chief executives knowing or the commission knowing. And so as you set up the city manager position, does that also decrease public accountability, or is it neutral? What is your opinion of that?
Yeah. In mostly my experience, where that shift of power goes more towards the department heads in the smaller municipalities, particularly where there's a lot of turnover in that elected office. And there's not a big expectation, unlike here, that mayor may only show up the night of the meetings. Maybe one night a week to sign checks, and then shows up for the meeting. So they're not doing the operations. And so that responsibility for the day-to-day operations falls upon the clerk and the department heads. So there's a lot of power concentrated in there. And you might have two terms of someone that's laissez-faire as an elected mayor, and then you get someone that comes in that's very, I'm hands-on. I'm retired, I got nothing else to do, I'm gonna hang out here in City Hall and I'm gonna direct day-to-day operations. And so there's that inconsistency, and then there's that resistance amongst those department heads. It's like, okay, I'll hunker down, I'll placate you as best I can, or I'll fight to the point where I'm not gonna get fired with you, with the mayor, because I know in 4 years you're going to probably bounce anyway. Managers might have some of that if there's a high turnover rate, that it's like, okay, I'll just wait you out as well. But like I've said, here in Montana, we have a longer longevity of those managers, and so there's a different accountability that those managers might bring to bear. And they bring an expertise that you may or may not have with an elected chief executive. You've had good experience with having, competent elected chief executives, and the risk is that may not always be the case. I can think of one community right now that since it was incorporated has had 2 mayors, and one of which has served for over 20 years as a mayor, 30 years as the mayor, or anyway, a long time. And it's a 40-hour-a-week job for him. And all they've known in that municipality is this individual running the show, 40 hours a week in a small town. He's retired, and this is his life. He helped incorporate, and he's been running the show ever since. He may not be running again this next cycle, and you might shift to someone that just shows up for the 2-hour council meeting once a month, and they're all kind of freaking out. It's like, we've known he's been like a manager, and he's been getting paid $600 a month. And that's kind of their concern, and that's what they're discussing as their study commission. We may not have that same capacity with the next mayor. There's a vulnerability that we have that we could minimize that vulnerability and that risk by having a mayor, so we know, or a manager, because we can always hire the person with competence, where we're subject to the whims of whoever we find in town who's willing to stand for election and has the capacity to do that job, right? You may not always have those 3 things, in place.
So am I gaining the understanding that public accountability comes through what is in process in terms of what happens at the commission, and then through ordinance in regards to how meetings are conducted, public notification, et cetera, like as it's already spelled out currently for us?
Yeah, so that your operations and how you govern will be the same. It's just, I think, how the city county is going to be administered. Like I said, you've had good luck with having people with high capacity, so it's been minimal risk. You haven't felt that risk, and you may not, because you have a large population to choose from, where some of these other municipalities may not have as many people. You got 35,000 people to choose from. You might have people that have both competence and willingness that are going to fight for that position.
All right, Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to follow up with what Raylan was saying, with addressing accountability, I think there is a hesitancy from the folks that I've been talking with regard to the accountability to the voter. With regard to a manager, they feel that's like a separation instead of a competency issue, someone day-to-day operations. And I like the conversation and learning about the hybrid with a manager and then a mayor, a figurehead, if you will. But that accountability to the voter, because they don't get to vote on a manager, they vote on the commission, and the manager is then accountable to the commission, and there's your accountability, but it's a little bit further away than an elected chief executive. Can you expound on that? Yeah. And the successes or detriments to that accountability and access to the voter?
And great question. So in theory, the manager or chief executive should be executing the directives of the commission. We've created a policy, then the manager needs to follow that policy. So there's not a lot of discretion. There shouldn't be a lot of discretion. Now we know there's discretion baked in there. But there shouldn't be a lot of discretion given to that manager or chief executive. They should be carrying out the policies of the commission. So if they're getting political pressure from the public not to do something, and I'm going to want to win votes because I'm not going to do something that the commission wants me to do, I don't know, that might happen, or I'm not going to do it to the level that the commission wants me to, and I don't have to account to the commission. I'm going to, again, that comes back to my own vision. This is my own vision. Animal control, I think is a waste of time. So I'm going to drag my feet as an elected chief executive on standing up that department, or, and what is the commission going to say about that? Speed it up. Yeah, well, pound sand. I'm not responsible to what you want. You told me to do it. I'm going to do it on my own time. I'm responsible and accountable to the public. Does that make sense? And if I feel like they're not happy with me, I better speed it up. If I had a manager, or the commission says, look, we want you to set up that animal control department. We want you to get it going. We're giving you 6 months. And if you don't, we're going to have a conversation when it comes to your performance evaluation. I'm motivated to get that done. Does that make sense? I'm just throwing that out, I'm making stuff up as I go along. But that could be an example where I could slow walk this because really you're not my boss. And if I feel like I have sufficient, or the public doesn't know. The public doesn't know when I'm dragging my feet. They don't know what's going on, all the turmoil that one person could create inside this building, right? They don't know what's going on, but you all probably know, well, the commission may really know the dysfunction that's happening here, but as long as, water's flowing and toilets are flushing and streets are somewhat smooth, That was the thing I always see in courthouses is it's difficult for people to be held accountable at the electoral box, at the ballot box, when their behavior is really compromising the effectiveness of the county in the courthouse, because people really don't know the drama that goes on in there. Does that make sense? They can kind of hide from that. Anyway, but is that making sense?
It does make sense.
The elected could drag their feet.
Yeah.
And you can say we want it done in 6 months. It's like, eh.
So to kind of follow up and we're just going with these examples a little bit. So let's say we have a city manager and they aren't performing, like they're slow walking or whatever, so they're not standing up something as quickly as possible, then the commission would hold that person accountable and could terminate, depending on the way that the charter is written and how we put those contracts together, and move that person out quickly, as compared to if there's an elected person, they're waiting 4 years for the electorate to decide to move that person out, and then there's conflict.
You're just grinding for 3.5 years.
So then moving back to Dan's question, are we then a bit unbalanced where the legislative is holding the cards in some ways?
Yeah. Yeah. And so there could be a greater efficiency. And so when holding the cards, you got to think about what are the potential downsides of having that balance of power more in that commission's hands, in their hands than having that more of a balance. What are the downsides? What are the upsides? So you may get more effective and efficient delivery of whatever the decisions are being made by that elected body than if you had that balance of power.
Okay, so it's like trading perhaps efficiency for balance in some regards.
Yeah.
Okay.
And back to the representation too, right? What the question you're asking is, and so that's the other question I have, is that accountability and that representation of that chief executive to the public. In theory, they should just be following the policies, and they don't have a whole lot of a discretion in theory, but we know that they do.
Yeah.
There was a community, really quickly, there's a community that was unhappy with the manager. And so during the voter review, they were saying, well, I said, what's your beef with the manager? It's like, well, they're doing this annexation, and we don't like the annexations. The people that are being annexed don't like being annexed, and they fought it, and they lost in court, and they're being annexed by the city. And I said, well, what's your beef with the manager? And it's like, well, he's annexed. He's not doing anything that the commission hasn't asked him to do. So they were looking to switch back to an elected mayor, because if we had an elected mayor, we know that we can pressure him not to annex us. It's like, it's not the mayor's choice either. The commission is the decision-making body. They decide it's time to annex, execute it. And so there was a frustration that they were having, is that and we can't have a change. It's like you lost. You lost in the democratic process. You were the minority and you lost. And they were unwilling to accept that. So we're going to change the structure of government, thinking that was going to fix the problem. And there was no solution wherein that they could influence one person to not have something happen. They're still going to have to go to that legislative body who is most interested in what's the best for the most. And that's why we have a larger body. If it was just one person, well, then it's going to be the best for who I think it's going to be for the best. Where here we have a diverse debate back and forth, and then we say, here's our final decision, execute it, manager or chief executive.
Mr. Dennehy?
Madam Chairman, thank you, Dan. And tagging along with what Cindy's saying, the same sort of conflicts and comments that I have been getting in the community is, we like electing the chief executive.
Yeah.
We like it because they, in theory, work for us. It's a 4-year term, and if he or she is dragging their feet, then you're up for election. And I get the theory of having that city manager there working for the legislative branch. You have 6 months to fix the dog problem. And if you don't, that's part of your annual review. You didn't do it. So there's now we're reevaluating what we need to do, and you might not be here next year. But this sort of grinding for 3.5 years, using your idea, Dan, that's what government is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, government, and what's good about this government is it's nonpartisan. So you don't have the typical parties, Democrat Party against the Republican Party, whether it's at the federal level or at the state level, and that tends to be much more political than here. But that grinding, if you have a leader, should get together with the council and whoever the executive is, and work out some compromise, because that's what politics is. That's what government is compromise. So that's kind of the idea that I'm thinking here, trying to debate in my mind what's going to happen, what's going to be good for this community in the future.
Yeah.
The future. And so I just needed to just maybe talk about that grinding a little bit, because that's what government does, is grind. And if there's no compromise, then it's not good for anyone involved.
Right, and I think, yes, and I think that grind does, so many thoughts I have. So, Let's just take the elected chief executive. There's a potential for that grinding, right? We want some level of that pushback, and because we get better decisions when we have diverse opinions and we're really working through that, right? We're finding consensus. With a chief executive, that grinding could also go beyond that effective to dysfunction, and that's where you're at. You're waiting for this. We've got to hold on in a dysfunctional impasse for however long until we have a new election. And in the hopes that the public is aware enough that there's a level of dysfunction and that they're going to be smart enough that there's going to be a better alternative. There's a lot of things that play into that. With the manager, this is my job, and it's in my best interest to keep 4 of the 7 or 7 of the 12 or whatever the number is. They've got to be okay with me to keep my job. At any time, at any meeting, a motion can come up, notice and all that other stuff. But the thought being, and I lose the majority of that, I'm down the road. So I have a vested interest to work with this commission to try to find consensus, to really push to make sure that before things come to that final vote, we have pushed, and the staff is working to find what are the alternatives, what other options we have, and we are really trying to find the best solution. Where there may be political interest or whatever on the other side, that we could create an impasse, and there's no way to fix that. Where we shift from that grinding, so in some respects, you're hiring someone that has that experience and expertise to work with this diverse group of people around the issues in our community, engaging the public to try to find those solutions. And and I think there's a built-in motivation to do that, because at any time, if I'm not doing my job well, I'm down the road. So good or bad, right or wrong. And Missoula, what do they got, 80,000 people there in the city of Missoula? They still have an elected mayor. Now they have a whole chief administrative office. They've got 3 or 4 people that do the day-to-day operations. So they've hired the professional help to do the day-to-day operations. That mayor is still elected, very capable and competent. They have had very capable and competent mayors, but they use that staff very well. So they can still retain their position, their regular employment, and rely upon that staff to do the work. But at the end of the day, there's that hybrid. They have that accountability to the public that Missoula seems to like, but they also have that, the other side of it, they have that professional people doing that day-to-day operations. So it's, which you can also do. I think you've got your administrative assistant, what do they call it? So you can really look at that language and say, look, we want to have this chief executive elected, but we also want to put some stronger language in here about this other position, that we want to have that hybrid. We like both of those things and what both of those things bring to you. And so embark on an experiment. So let's try it, because you have a unique form of government that is different than Missoula's. No, I didn't include Missoula in this because they have there wasn't answering the question about a manager. So I would, on our website, you can go look at there. You have met, great. So I don't think they have anything earth-shattering in their language. They just say that they can do it. And that's at the discretion, too, of that mayor. They can decide whether they have a CAO or not. Yeah, hopefully that helps.
Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is probably more of a comment than a question, Dan, but I'd like your thoughts on it. Respectfully disagree with Dan over there. Just with the grinding issue, I think if you were to have a manager or a hybrid situation where you'd have a mayor or a figurehead and a manager, the grinding, I think you would need to give the manager the proper tools to succeed. Because if you just plop them in and just say go for it, and they don't have a roadmap or the benefit of you're getting hired by a commission, and ultimately, hopefully, obviously, a majority of the commission approves of the person they're hiring. So that grinding would be helpful with tools, but also I beg to differ to say that Butte is not diversified. If you go to a commission meeting, a county commission meeting, it's always 10 to 1, 11 to 11 to 1, 10 to 2, 12-0. So it's really tipped in a very partisan direction. So I just have a trouble thinking that nonpartisan, oh, we're good to go. Not necessarily the case in Butte-Silver Bow currently. It could change over time, and that's what's great about updating the charter, because where are we going to be in 10 years? We all don't know. But as the population changes, things could change culturally as well. We don't know that, but I don't think we're at a point of diversification right now with Butte-Silver Bow, to be honest. But I think the tools package and allowing that person the autonomy to do what they need to do and working with staff to have that cohesiveness is probably very beneficial.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess my comment to the votes, right, 12-0 or 11-1 or whatever it might be, is we can look at it as in a couple different lenses, and it's you've got to decide what lens works for your community. I'm an outsider and I don't know, but it could mean that we have a unified group of people that all see the world through the same lens, and so we're not getting that diverse ideas, right? So we all see the problem the same way, the same solution. It's an easy no-brainer. So if they sat on the back porch on the 4th of July and said, we're going to solve the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, and then get it done in 20 minutes and say, why don't they just do this? Because they see the world the same way, right? It's far more complex than that. So having a diverse group of people, you're going to get a whole, so that's where it may take longer to come to a conclusion, because we have those diverse ideas and we're really trying to find and hear and listen, and it takes longer, but we get to the point where we find some level of consensus. So the other side of that coin is, one, either we're all see this world the same way, or two, we've worked on this issue until we have found some consensus to where 11 out of 12 of us are happy with that outcome. And from where it started to where it ends on the final decision has gone through several iterations. I don't know where you're at, right? But I do know that it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just what's the path, the concept to decision did it go through? Did it take 20 minutes on the back porch to solve? Or was it, not to say we want 12 years of peace talks before we got there. So does that help? So you decide, and yeah.
Additional thoughts or questions from commission?
I'm sorry if I'm taking too much words. We're both.
So I wanted to come back to, and then I promise this is it. I wanted to come back to our capacity to hybridize and experiment with a different model. So it is possible that we could say we want a smaller commission, and maybe out of that commission there's an elected mayor, and we'd have a chief executive who's elected and a chief of staff, or whatever sort of choose your own adventure, to use Ms. Shaw's words, that this commission and our community thinks might be a good fit for us, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, so we have that ability with some guardrails, and then also this great research that the state of Montana has been doing with these different forms of government across our state. We can investigate those as well.
Yeah, I think you've got a lot of flexibility, as long as it's not in that space where the legislature says we've reserved the right to that, to manage that. The rest of it's up to you. And I'm trying to remember, how many other elected officers do you have? I think everyone else is hired, right? You don't have, it's just the commission? So we got clerk and recorders elected. It's okay. Treasurer. Not that you want to do this, but here is something that general governing powers counties can't do. And we've had some discussion with some of these other counties. They're saying, gosh, we don't mind having our city or our county commission being elected partisan. But these other row officers, they're more administrative in their function. They just follow what the law says. They don't have a lot of policy-making ability. They just say, this is the law, and I'm going to follow the law and administer these functions of the county. And so why have those positions be partisan? So there's been some discussion, can we split that and have the partisan elections? And they can't do that right now. Have all the row officers be elected nonpartisan, the commission being elected partisan. because it's not an option in the law. So they would have to adopt self-governing powers in order to split that, to do something unique or different, or even have a charter. So that's where you're at. You can do all sorts of interesting things. Part of it is, what's the willingness of the community to accept that? So I think you're right, doing the right thing, having these debates here, trying to think about where should we land in shopping an idea, right? And I think it's great you're asking the staff, what do you think? What are your input? And you're gathering this information. At some point, you're going to say, okay, we've heard from everybody here. We're narrowing down our options of what we're thinking. Then I would engage the public. I think having a handful of things for them to respond to versus what all y'all think, because it's like, I don't know. And I don't know enough to know if I have an opinion. But if you give me a specific, this or that, now that's worth the debate. And if you can get down to a half dozen or so of those, this or that, particularly from the input you've been receiving and what other input you've been getting from the community, that might really help that next phase to lead into a final report with some sort of a proposal. But I think you're right on track. You're asking all the right questions. I think having some good debate here that the public can listen, observe, weigh in at future meetings and come and say, hey, I heard you had that conversation about this, this or that. Here's what I think. And it just helps the community get more and more engaged. Because at the end of the day, if they don't understand what you're proposing, if they haven't had a chance to vet it and weigh in on it, it might just fizzle. And I think you've had some in history that you've had some proposal that just fizzled, and others that every one of them passed. I think 96, I think everything you put on the ballot passed. And I think in 86, it was a bust. All your proposals, they all failed. Was that? I'm just telling you what the data says. And I may be wrong in that, but you're right. Yeah. And it doesn't mean that those were bad ideas. It's just maybe not the right time, or they just didn't understand, or whatever it is. You could probably dissect that process. And so, I don't know. It's exciting. Like I say, I envy you folks in having that position to kind of grind through this. It's kind of fun and interesting, and it's a lot of work, though. So I appreciate your willingness to do it.
All right. Anything else? All right. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Clark, and we appreciate you making the drive, and I'm sure we will have follow-up questions.
Well, I apologize for being late. I was on the phone with another community, and they were like, 15 minutes turned into 45.
We appreciate your being patient with us as we moved ahead. Yeah, so, thank you. Okay, I'm getting a request for a 5-minute recess, and so we'll put you on in 5 minutes. Okay. Folks, I'm going to reconvene us if we could, please. All right. And up next is Cindy Sherman, our Butte-Silver Bow Clerk and Recorder. I haven't had caffeine recently. Thank you, Ms. Sherman, for wading through the presentations, and we really appreciate you coming up and presenting.
Sure, I think questions 3 through 6 now, I'll just say whatever he said.
Okay. I like that. It speeds things up for us all. Very good. And you are one of our elected officials, and so we recognize that's different than department heads, and so we appreciate you spending some time with us, especially as an elected official and the responsibilities that you have for our constituency. So we appreciate your time with us tonight, and we'll do the same thing as you saw in our first presentation, and we'll start with Ms. Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Greetings to another Cindy. How are you? Is it with an I or a Y? We've got this thing between Purdue.
Why? Yes. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Well, our first question is, what are the specific responsibilities and duties of the Butte-Silver Bow Clerk and Recorder?
Well, the clerk and recorder for Butte-Silver Bow has really 2 positions. I'm the clerk and recorder and the election administrator. That's not always the same. Many counties just have a clerk and recorder and an election administrator. Some have both. Some they combine them with other offices. But in Butte-Silver Bow, it's a clerk and recorder, election administrator. As the clerk and recorder, I'm the gatekeeper of county records. I'm responsible for the safekeeping, cataloging, disposing of, and giving information to our citizens. And that information includes deeds, various types of deeds, liens, birth and death records, Council of Commissioners agendas, minutes, also minutes of all the other boards that meet. Packets, recordings of minutes, resolutions, ordinances, recorded votes, other records that are recorded and filed, which would be county property, leases, tax sales, quiet titles, termination of joint tenancies, other records like that. We also assist the public with property ownership information and genealogy projects. And we do records preservation of all of our historic records that are irreplaceable. For the accounting side of it, we process all vouchers and warrants approved by the Council of Commissioners and the Finance and Budget Department. We maintain and authorize a signee database. That's from all departments. Those are the people that are allowed to sign a claim. We can't just accept those from everybody, just people that are allowed. We review those claims that are signed by department heads and managers. Typically, we file the vouchers, sorry. We process payments to vendors. And through all of those, I work with many of the departments. The clerk and recorder is involved with pretty much every department in the county. I work closely with the county attorney, the land office and planning, GIS, the community development, the treasurer, budget and finance, the commissioners. And then as the election administrator, I'm responsible for administrating all of the elections. That includes our federal primary, federal general, municipal, which in Butte typically is our Walkerville election, special elections, which I believe our last special election was when we voted for the pool. Or no, that was Gianforte when Zinke left to be the cabinet member. We elected Gianforte. That was a special election. Special district election, which is our water, sewer, and our volunteer fire department. And then now, in the last couple of years, we've administered the school elections, including School District 1. I guess we've done the smaller schools for years, but School District 1 is new. This year, so far, in my short 3 months, I've administrated 14 elections because I had 1 water sewer, 9 volunteer fire department, 4 school, and I have started the Walkerville election, even though that's not until September. I've already started the process of that. Elections are very involved. There's a calendar that you have to follow, all of these things. You have to meet deadlines on candidates' filing times and their publishing notices, and so there's a lot to an election. So even though 13 of those 14 elections have been by acclamation, I still have run and administrated all of those elections. So that's been an education. The election administrator maintains all of the voter registration, which is, there's a lot to voter registration, a lot of laws that we have to follow. I manage and have to maintain all of my election judges, which is about 130 for federal elections. I have to keep track of our election voting machines and supplies and ballots. Ballots have to go through quite a process of creating them and proofing them and getting them ready, making sure everything's all perfect before they go out to the ballots or out to the voters. Polling places. So I work closely with the Civic Center, with our IT department, law enforcement. I work with them throughout all of the elections. Petitions, candidate and campaign practices, and again, following all the laws and timelines associated with all of those elections. There's also the HAVA grants that are become available throughout elections. HAVA is Help America Vote. I also have worked with Lisa, IT, emergency management, law enforcement, with cybersecurity training and just going through our practices, making sure that we have a safe election process. So that, in a nutshell, is my job. I could talk for hours about elections if you ever want to learn more, but keep it to a minimum as much as I can.
Ms. Shaw, you have a follow-up?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, thank you for that, Cindy. We're always just amazed at how much you folks do, and you wanted to be elected, so there you go. Just saying. I did that too. Anyway, how much time? I know there's a special time, of course, for elections, and that's every 2 years. But how much time would you say overall, when you take your 2 administrative sections, your elected administration and the other side of it, the clerk and recorder, what would you say how that balances out?
I asked Linda that when I was running, and she said it was about 50-50.
Okay.
And yeah, so far in my few months, it's probably been about 50-50, even though it is a non-election year. So I don't know. Once we get into federal elections, it might be more.
Thank you.
Ms. Dolan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Cindy. I'd like your thoughts on, as we're talking about structure and with the local government here, your thoughts on pulling out election administrator. Like you said at the beginning, some counties in Montana have a clerk and recorder for all the administrative stuff that you have in the top line, and then a different election administrator to just concentrate solely on elections and all that is dealt therein. Do you feel that Butte-Silver Bow has grown enough that we would need that separation, even though it's 50-50 in your estimation, and Linda, your predecessor? I'm wondering, though, with the complexities that you discuss, that it would be beneficial to have 2 people, one concentrating on the administrative part of the gatekeeping, and then someone with elections.
It's been something I've thought about. I would have to probably wait a little while before I for sure said that or made a decision on what I thought of that. I do have my chief deputy who handles a lot of her main job is the clerk and record, or voter registration. Her main job of the election administrator part is voter registration. So she handles almost all of that. So during non-election time, other than the election setup and just running the elections, the voter registration side is pretty much taken care of by my chief deputy. And then she also handles a lot of our council of commissioner things. So in a sense, I would say that my chief deputy sort of splits my job for me. So right now, I wouldn't think that we would need to do that, but in the future, maybe. But I do have a really good chief deputy too that is like so knowledgeable. I'm worried if she ever leaves me. So.
Great. Other follow-up questions? Okay, Mr. Silk, question 2.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Cindy, for being here. Question number 2, what are the most critical problems presently confronting Butte-Silver Clerk and Recorders Department?
Well, with only being here in office for a few months, I think the biggest problem that I found just getting started was just lack of communication within the departments of the county. I think our chief executive tries to, he has meetings, he has elected official meetings, he has department head meetings, but it takes, like I've had to initiate a lot of the communication between the department heads. So I think that's, I would really like to see a lot more communication, collaboration between them, because especially with my job, that's such a, I work with all of them, and so it would be nice to have a little more communication with them. An example is like IT, coming in as a new elected official, that IT department, it would be good for them to have a set, like a list of things that the new clerk and recorder needs, so they can come in and get my system set up and make sure I have all the emails, because I have like 4 different email groups I'm part of. Make sure I have all of those. Make sure I have the programs that I need to work in. And because over the 3 months, it's been several times where I've been like, oh, I need that. I didn't know I needed, I don't know anything about it, and suddenly it's like, oh, I'm supposed to be working with this program. And so just having that, like IT come in and say, okay, we got you set up on everything, this is what this does, and we need this, then that would be extremely helpful. And then just finance and budget and HR and treasurers working with me through my revenue stuff. That's something I haven't learned a ton about yet, as far as what my revenues are through the clerk and recorder office. So communication is a big thing. And then elections. I think that because elections are continually becoming more and more contentious with each year, I've done elections for 12 years, and I've seen that change with every election that I've been a part of. I think that a big thing that we need to be watchful of is just planning ahead and making sure that we are prepared for just the things that we need to do to make our elections safe and efficient and secure. Things are constantly changing, and the cybersecurity part of it is a big deal. It's stuff I've been learning a lot about over the last few months with IT, and so that's a big thing with elections, of course. And then just getting information out to voters. it's hard to know how to get that information out. I'm sure you guys are seeing that too, is just how to get information, how to get the public engaged with what you guys are trying to do. I see the same thing with elections, just so, yeah.
Cindy, I think it was mentioned to have a standard operating procedures. Is that what you're kind of talking about? Like you come in as a clerk and recorder, there's a set of SOPs?
Yeah. I think so, yeah.
Maybe you'll develop that.
I think so.
All right, follow-up questions. Ms. Dolan.
Thank you. So you were just talking about cybersecurity, and I just want to make the clarification for folks watching tonight. I hope you're not saying that cybersecurity issues and concerns with the security of elections are not with the machines.
Oh, no, there's just a lot of, so we had an evaluation with CISA, which is a cybersecurity organization, that they come in and they go through our processes. A lot of it had to do with IT, on what they have, what their infrastructure is in protection of elections in specific, and then they go through the physical security as well, and they look to see what we have as far as security cameras, and just door locks, auto door locks, and limited access to things. And then they come back with recommendations of things that they think that we should improve on, or give us just different programs, things that we can use, different grants that we can apply for to get help in using those things. So yeah, that's it's more just learning about it and implementing new things to help.
Kim.
Thank you, Chairman Brandel. Cindy, when you talk about security and safety, are you also talking about like the physical place or just the safety of the ballots, elections, electronics? Are you also talking about the physical plant?
We discussed with the physical security evaluation. We did discuss having a police presence there, and different mechanisms that we can use to help keep the public safe as well. So.
Any other follow-ups? Okay. All right. Question 3. Mr. Denny.
Thanks, Cindy, for coming tonight. Starting 3, 4, 5, that you can say ditto. No, it's what changes in the government structure, organization, or powers would help the clerk and recorder do a better job? I guess we're asking your opinion on what you heard from folks from MSU, city manager, chief executive, less council commissioner members. And if you have an opinion, we'd be glad to hear that.
I think that the chief executive, mayor position, I see both sides to that. I think that's a difficult decision there. I am not sure really what my opinion is on that at this point anyway. The commissioners, the only thing I would say is if you want to change the commissioners, the way we handle that, then I would just really make sure that you take into account our rural areas and make sure that they all have the correct representation. I mean, I thought that Dan, is that his name? Sorry. I think what he said with Bozeman having everybody all in that downtown area, that would just not be a very good representation for our rural areas. So I would just really caution you to just keep that in mind when you're making that decision. So.
Okay, moving on to number 4.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Cindy, thank you. Question 4, what advice would you give to the study commission in terms of conducting a comprehensive and impactful review of local government?
Again, I think that what I said with the commissioners would be a good thing. I actually did really like. I was pleased that Lisa mentioned TextMyGov because I hadn't thought about that. I would be very open to you guys discussing or to, sharing that to TextMyGov with you guys. We use it for elections only right now, and we have a lot more capacity in our contract with them for some other uses that I've been kind of looking for. In fact, I met with them last week going, what other things can I do with this? Because the contract I have has a whole lot more available, and I want to make sure we get the most use out of it. I think we have 300,000 texts available to us, and we've only used like 5,000. So for elections, we use it for our rejected ballots and our undeliverable ballots. If we have a text or a cell phone number for our voters, we put them in to TextMyGov, and we can send a mass text out saying, we've received your ballot as undeliverable. If you still live in Butte-Silver Bow, we need your new information so that we can get you your ballot. If you've got a rejected ballot, we say you've got a rejected ballot. You didn't sign it. We need you to come in and sign it for your ballot to count. So, and it's been a very successful thing to get responses. Making phone calls or sending out more letters, we don't often get as many responses as we have with TextMyGov. So I would be very open to having more discussion with you guys about that.
Just to follow up really quick, I want to make sure I understand how it works. So citizens opt in to be texted by Butte-Silver Bow.
It's actually, so you guys could use it as like on the website. It could be it's a widget on the website. They could put in a keyword like study commission or something that you guys would come up, and then it would go to you guys so that you could respond. They could ask you a question, you could respond to it, or else you could send out a mass message just asking for input or inviting to meetings or different things. So I think that it could be helpful to you guys. So I would love to share it with you guys. So,
Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is interesting, this TextMyGov. What has the reaction been from local folks? I know people don't like spam, per se, on their phones, coming at them all the time and all these things. And I know we want to be judicious about it, but you're right, it's hard to get feedback from a letter or, the old conventional ways of doing things. But what has the response been if it's not an opt-in, it's just a send out? Do people call angry, like, how'd you get my cell phone? Or what has the reaction been? Or has it been a good reaction?
we've had pretty good reaction with it. It's always really nice when we have 200 undeliverable ballots come in on one day, and we either have to send out 200 more letters, or we have to sit and make 200 phone calls. But to enter in those cell phone numbers and to type in a message and hit send, and to immediately start getting some responses back from people saying, oh, I've moved, I no longer live there, or hey, I have a new address, it's this, and then we can forward that ballot and then get a new registration from them in the mail so they can update their registration. But we haven't had many that have been, I actually don't know of any that we've had that have been angry. And Linda also used it for her election judges. So the election judges, so she could send out mass texts saying, hey, I need to be here at this time, or I've got these trainings set up. So those are the ways we've used it. Like I said, we only used 5,000 and some messages, so we've still got a lot more. And we could probably use some in the clerk and recorder office side of it, but we don't have a real need for it. So I think you guys should consider it. Yeah.
Ms. Casey?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Cindy, do you just to follow up with that, do you have a database that already has the citizens' cell phone numbers in it?
The ones that we've entered, yeah. We haven't used it for other than election judges and then people that have. But we've been encouraging, my staff has been encouraging our voter, when a person registers to vote, to give us their phone number or cell phone number if they, most people give cell phone numbers now, because we do need to be able to get a hold of them when they have a rejected ballot. I mean, if you don't know, we have to try to contact them in some way, and if they don't respond, we don't know if they actually know if they have that. So it's really nice when you get a response, because you know that they've been told and now it's on them. So,
Mr. Steppen?
So, just so I'm clear, thank you, Madam Chair. Is there a way for us to put out a call to action that would allow them to opt in? I think that's what we're getting at.
So I would have to meet. I could call and set up a meeting with our representative again. In fact, I think there's a webinar in a couple days that might be of interest to somebody if they wanted to come up and do that with me. But I can't remember what it's on, but I think it would be relevant, I think. So, but I think I would just have to set it up so that you guys could use it and it could work. So.
I think a likely and easy way would be to have a QR code that would go to wherever it is that you register for, wherever you register for this service. And then we could put that on our materials, and it could be on the website or whatever. I'm looking at Ms. Kennison in the audience thinking, is that a possibility?
It can happen. I would caution you putting them on something that you're sending out, a brochure, because you do found people will put their own QR code over it, especially if it's something where you're paying a payment, and you read the QR code that's sitting out on the street. It could be going to somebody's Venmo account, not, to pay your parking ticket, whatever. So just be careful when you use a QR code.
Good point. Thank you. Yeah, very good. Any other follow-ups with that particular piece? Okay. Are we ready to move on to number 5?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Cindy, thanks for being here tonight. What inefficiencies could be addressed through the changes to the local government structure?
I think that the clerk and recorder, election administrator is really bound by the Montana Code Annotated. Most of our duties are done very legally. Like Dan was saying, they're kind of not things that you guys can touch, I think. So I don't really know what that could look like for my department. So overall, I don't know. Sorry. I'm new and I'm sticking with that. I'm still learning.
Perhaps maybe think back to when you were running for clerk and recorder. I'm sure you heard from constituency about things that they'd like to see. Was there anything that kind of comes top of mind in terms of structure, function, or efficiency of Butte-Silver Bow that you could think might be needed?
I think the biggest thing that I've heard was just the transparency of our government. And I think our council is trying to help with that, with streaming more of their meetings and things. That's probably the biggest thing that I heard is people's concerns with the transparency, and maybe changing up the number of council members, and then maybe changing up how we do our chief executive and mayor position would help with that. I'm not sure.
Thank you. Ms. Dolan, number 6.
Okay, number 6. What challenges do you foresee for Butte-Silver Bow in the next 10 to 20 years? And does the current structure, government structure, position the city county to meet those challenges effectively? And I would add maybe your thoughts 10 to 20 years from now with, like you said, maybe in the future for election administrator versus clerk and recorder. But overall first, and maybe drill down to that. Thanks.
Yeah. Gosh, I think there could be a lot of new challenges with Butte. I mean, I anticipate that in the next 10 to 20 years, Butte's going to see a lot of growth. And I think that's going to bring a whole lot of new challenges to the county. That I think looking at restructuring how we do things is probably going to be something that we need to look at very seriously. I think as the clerk and recorder, as the election administrator, I think as the county grows, I think that we probably will need to look at making those positions individual positions. Some of the counties do some, like Helena, like Lewis and Clark County, they have their clerk and recorder do other positions as well. Their clerk and recorder, treasurer, and surveyor, I think, are all together. And I think Gallatin, I think Eric is clerk and recorder, treasurer, or clerk and recorder, surveyor, and election administrator, which I don't know how he does all that. I think he's got a lot of help. So there are different things that I did. Dan mentioned the city county or the League of Cities website where they have everybody's salary posted for the whole state. I've got that as well, and it's interesting to see what combined offices the other counties have. So that's a good site to look into to see what the other counties have combined as far as elected offices. So might be something to look into.
Any follow-ups? Mr. Silk.
Madam Chair, thank you. I'm looking at the charter under section 9.03, and it talks about every census year that the commissioner districts will be basically redrawn to make, it says commissioner districts are as nearly equal in population as possible. Has that happened?
Yes, we did redistricting in 2023.
Okay.
So that's 10 more years that'll be done again.
Okay, and then a follow-up to that, Madam Chair. Just for quick reference, are the voters who are voting in each of those districts, are they similar? I know that it's been mentioned that some Council of Commissioners have only received a couple hundred votes, and there's other council members that received more than that. And are some council members running unopposed, and how often does that happen? If you can.
Yes, there were commissioners that ran unopposed this year. I'm trying to think if there were 2. I can't remember for sure. But there were positions that were unopposed. And yeah, there are districts that are much more involved. District 1, which is down on the flats, they are traditionally our biggest, that we the biggest voter turnout. And then uptown here, I forget which district that is, but they're so 11 has a very high voter turnout as well. 11, yes. District 9 has a big turnout. But then there's others that I think it's just the different groups of people that aren't really as involved in voting. So that's something it would be great to change. Getting voter information out, voter education is something that I really want to do better at. It's something that I'm pretty passionate about, is actually going out and talking to people and getting just people more involved in understanding the process and knowing how to vote. what they need to do to vote, so.
Mr. Dennehy.
Madam Chair, Cindy, when we're talking about the council commissioners' districts, would it be the clerk and recorder's responsibilities to look at those districts and redistrict them if we decide to make those districts smaller? Would it be your responsibility to make sure that the populations are equal?
I think probably.
Well, you could thank us
I
later.
haven't looked at that, but I do believe that probably would be my responsibility.
The only reason I'm saying that when we did it way back when in '86, the clerk and recorder was Bill Driscoll, and he had a lot to do with the districting before we made any decisions, and it was a lot of work. So
It is a lot of work.
Yeah.
I was with Linda in 23 when she
Yeah,
did the
exactly.
redistricting, and she'd like, well, look at the map, see, and I'm like, my mind is blown. So
yeah. Well, thank you.
yeah.
Ms. Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and to Dan's question, the redistricting is based solely on the census every 10 years. And I know occasionally my district would bump down. I get one block of Broadway, which my district was always granted on up. But my understanding, it is strictly, I don't know if it's federal or state designation, but it's based on, they divide all the populace by 12, basically. And however that shakes out from the census, I think is pretty cut and dried.
Yeah, it's difficult because you have different boundaries between your Senate and representative districts, and then you've got your commissioner districts, and so you have to try to work within all of those lines, and it's a challenging thing because sometimes we've got a couple precincts that have very few voters in them because they're within a certain commissioner district, so they have to stay in that commissioner district, but they are in a different Senate district than than the rest of that precinct. So it becomes what we call a split. And so we have to have an 8.1 and then an 8.2, even though 8.2 only has 60 voters in it. So there's a challenge to that. So.
Lots to think about. Follow-up questions. All right. Moving on to number 7.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Cindy. And I see that you supplied us with the information, but for the people that are watching, what is the current rate of the annual compensation for the Butte-Silver Bow clerk and recorder and members of the clerk and recorder's professional staff? And do you think these are fair?
Okay. As clerk and recorder, my salary is $90,260. And then I have a $2,000 add-on as the election administrator. That salary is the same as all of the elected official salaries. And then my chief deputy is $81,235. My lead deputy in the front office is a clerk 4. He makes $53,092. And I have 2 deputy clerk and recorders that are clerk 3, which make $46,764.50. And then a part-time file clerk, which is clerk 2 at $20,067. That position was my position before I became the clerk and recorder. I haven't filled that position yet. I wanted to get my feet on the ground before I opened up that position and made a decision on what projects I want to do to keep that person busy. And so I haven't hired for it yet, but I will be in the near future. I have several projects that I'm looking into, mainly digitizing our historic records. It's what I was doing for Linda for that part-time position, and so I finished what I was working on at that time, and so now I've got to decide which one I want to start on again and work with that person or fill that position for that. So.
Follow-up questions? Ms. Dolan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Cindy, I see at the bottom you say you'd like to increase the pay for election judges.
Oh, yes.
And what is currently, I know the process is a lot, and we have an aging population. Are you satisfied with the number of election judges? Is there still interest in being an election judge? Can you give us a sense of where that's at for the community?
We do have I think a lot of our election judges are aging. It's difficult to get younger election judges. They often have to take time off of work to do it, and it's not a very good paying job, which a lot of them I think would volunteer for it, but they do have to take time off of work. It's another thing I want to do is actually go out to the farmers markets and the different craft fairs and different things and try to set up a table and talk to people about coming in and becoming election judges. I think it can be a very rewarding job because you learn the process. You get to understand exactly what goes into an election, and there's a whole lot more than people realize. So being part of that, and then also just feeling like you can make a difference in the election. So I'm hoping to get some younger people, but it has been a challenge historically to do that. And as an aging population, we're going to need more over the years. So increasing the pay, I think, would be nice. But like this year, Linda's budget for the 2024-25 was almost $16,000 over the budget she had for election judges. So, and that was paying at, the majority make $12 an hour. There's a few like the tabulation judges and the floor manager and things that they make 18, and there's a few that make 16, but the vast majority of the judges only make $12 an hour, which is not very much. So I'd like to increase that if I am allowed, but just getting enough judges is a challenge, and like we need about 130 just to man the precincts and the floors and the tabulation and the resolution and all the different positions that you need to run an election. So.
Ms. Dolan.
Just one quick follow-up. I thank you for that, because I think that not only is it a great learning, like you said, a great learning experience, but the fact that especially folks that are in the tabulation and all the intricacies, if they leave and we don't have that institutional knowledge passed on to somebody else, that's a complicated job. So I'm glad you're focusing on that, because if we lose that and trying to educate folks with that whole process, it's very difficult. So thank you for that. Appreciate that.
Right. Any other follow-ups? Okay. Thank you so much for coming up tonight and sharing your perspectives with us, and good luck with the turning out more voters and recruiting judges. We're there to help as much as we can. So, all right. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Okay, folks, Matt and Ruth was not able to come tonight because of family illness. Apparently they had trouble with some deviled eggs, and the whole family is not feeling well, which as it were, I think it worked out in terms of our schedule tonight was very heavy and packed. So personally, I think it's a good thing that we need to reschedule Mr. and Ruth. So we'll move along to our unfinished business and our public outreach discussion. It looks like Party Line, Mary McCormick and Ben Thielen will be confirmed for Wednesday, May 21st. Yes. And then we'll need 2 volunteers for June 18th. And I don't know who's not been on, yes? So Ms. Dolan and Ms. Casey, would you like to take June 18th? She's trying to hide over there. Mr. Silk, have you been on? Okay, so do you want to make it a three-part party line? I think that would work. Okay, so maybe the 3 of you for June 18th. Okay. Excellent. And then op-ed pieces, Mr. Steppen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Myself and Ray Lynn had an opportunity to meet with Mike Smith today with the Montana Standard to kind of explain what we're hoping to do with an op-ed or a series of op-eds and find out what parameters they wanted to keep us within or what flexibility we had on putting the information out and bringing the information in an attempt to have an engaged electorate. And so what we landed on was they're open to us having a series of op-eds. At least that was my interpretation, is they're looking forward to us providing information. And what we will likely do is here in the near future, in fact, whenever we're ready to move forward, probably do 2 relatively back-to-back op-eds. And then back-to-back meaning within a week of each other. And then from that point forward, maybe a standing monthly op-ed, updating on where we're at in the process and how the public can get engaged at that particular time. And so I've drafted, and I can share, I didn't email, it was just this afternoon. We met with Mike Smith this morning, but what op-ed number 1 might look like and what op-ed number 2, and it's basically taking what I'd shared with you prior, condensing it down to 2 roughly 500-word op-eds. The first one aimed at, it's titled "A Transparent and Engaged Study Commission Begins Its Work," and so it basically talks about what our charge is, what our goal as a commission is to engage the public, talks briefly about the ways that we can recommend change, so kind of teeing it up as to what our charge is. And then op-ed 2, I thought would be good to give the public an understanding of what Butte-Silver Bow's consolidated government structure looks like currently and begin the conversation on what alternative forms of government might look like. And so from that point, we can, as a group, decide what the next topic of the op-ed will be based on what the month ahead looks like based on our timeline. So I can share these with you now. I've got copies for everybody, and your feedback is welcomed. I think we incorporated all of the feedback that we got on the original with some lingering questions. Laura, you brought up a good question on whether our recommended changes can go also to the chief executive to implement. I think that's something that we want County Attorney Enruth to weigh in on.
Madam Chair, I see Dan looking kind of funny. On the other bucket that Cindy was talking about, that we hear about of different recommendations, my thought is some of those are recommendations that need to go to the executive side, being the chief executive, to implement or look at implementing versus the Council of Commissioners on the legislative side. So that was my thought there.
And also, the question too is, I think the last study commission had that bucket of recommendations, and they went directly to the county attorney. I don't think they even went to the commission or to the chief executive, and they just landed at the county attorney's office and then just stopped. They were never implemented. They were never. There was never any, and that's why the question I raised several weeks ago with County Attorney Enruth to say, will you be willing to look at those bucket of recommendations if we do in fact have some recommendations? And he said he would, but that's a really great point to see where those should land for action if needed.
I would think in a report they go to everyone, right? Like they would go to all the department, like they would go to everyone. And I guess it's the execution of those recommendations or the deliberation that we're discussing. So ultimately, I don't think we have control of that. It would be to go to the council for them to start mulling, and executive, office to also mull. But in regards to how they become implemented, it's out of our hands at that point.
Absolutely, yes. Madam Chair, and there's something in our study documents from MSU that says, I think 3 to 5 ballot initiatives go to the general public, and and your second bucket, I think it's at the Council of Commissioners, or the governing body, but we need to clear that up and make sure that, I think it has to do with the administrative side of the government, has to go to, or needs to go through the chief executive too, to implement them. And here's our suggestions, here's what you should do. And if you're not, okay, but yeah, it's just the suggestion, right?
So I would just make a suggestion in order to keep us moving along and getting to the meat of our work tonight too, is that could we take these back and give feedback to Matt? Perhaps can we turn it in 24 hours? Do you guys can we give that to him by tomorrow night? Yeah, okay, we can do homework and get it back to you by tomorrow night. Okay. Thank you for doing this. I appreciate it. It was, what do we have, 2,200 words or something, and he got to 600, so good job. Okay, moving on in our agenda. The next section was discussion about a marketing advertising contractor, and I just realized that I only CC'd the subcommittee with the emails that were sent out, but they were sent to Wet, Pioneer, I'm gonna Shanna Adams, Kayla Lappin with the BLDC, and Janet Cornish and Karen Corbin. Janet Cornish has declined our invitation at this time. Karen Corbin and Shanna were right back to say that they would be bringing back a proposal to us right away. Kayla has asked for some more information, and Terry Bieri from Pioneer has asked for more information. I've yet to hear from Wet. I asked for them to return the proposals to us in a rather short turnaround, asking for the proposals to come to us by May 14th. And so hopefully we'll have that. And I will send the email to the rest of the commission members. I apologize, but it basically had exactly the same things that we had discussed last meeting, and leaving it open to some creative ideas from them of how to do this community outreach piece well. I'm quite excited, at least by the responses that we've gotten from the people that said that they're willing to look at it. So there's some great movement there. Any other discussion about that marketing or advertising contractor? Okay. So moving on to our unfinished business, our new business, our 30-minute charter review.
Madam Chair, since Matt's not here, and since a number of the issues that I have suggested is more of a legal matter. I mean, a couple, I kind of deleted some language, and I don't know if I should be doing that, and so Matt should tell us. So I would suggest that maybe we table this issue and do preamble, section 1, section. We'll just add on a section for the I believe it's the Council of Commissioners, the powers and just do a little bit more homework for next week, and then if Matt's here next week, we could go forward and ask him the legal questions. It's just a suggestion. I'm good with whatever the commission wants, but some of them are going to be, I think, legal questions. But we I deleted the language that I don't think that I should have, but I need to.
Madam Chair.
Misha.
I would not do a thing with this charter without our legal counsel sitting down there, because the minute you think, the preamble, it just means an introduction. The minute you think that it's just, rubber stamp, you don't want to go there. So I would definitely concur with Dan. I don't mind waiting. And if you just want to add on section 3 to that, or is that what you're thinking, maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's a good plan of action. And I also want to remind us too that we are considering what might need to be changed. But if we are to look at, say, the legislative powers, that would be a whole another chapter of revisions and writing that we would have to propose for voters. So I think it isn't insane to let's move it to the next agenda, but I'm open to considering moving through this tonight. Okay. All right. So let's add this. We'll add section 3 to next week's homework. Like they were assigning homework. So so next week we'll review preambles in section 1, 2, and 3, and then hopefully Mr. Enworth will be able to join us.
And thank you for calling me insane, Madam Chair.
I said it wouldn't be.
Do you mean Articles 1, 2, and 3? Just to clarify.
Yep. Yep.
Articles 1, 2, and 3?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's correct. Okay, so we don't have a public meeting tonight. Any other scheduled matters? I don't think so, Ms. Cohn? Nothing? All right, public comment on anything not on the agenda but within the jurisdiction of the study commission. It's okay to say Raylan should drink caffeine before she comes to these meetings. All right, we do have to reschedule Mr. Enruth, so Ms. Cohn, if you could probably kind of massage that schedule around. And then next meeting will be Monday at 5 p.m. And we will be at the Emergency Center, Emergency Operations Center, instead of up here next week, next Monday.
At the south entrance.
Okay. All right. And I will entertain a motion to adjourn, please.
Second.
All right.
Madam Chair, just for the good of the order, Matt, you just want us to text you after we've read the 2 proposed op-eds? Would that
You
be
bet.
with
Text,
a
email,
thumbs up or
either way.
whatever?
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.